طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Welcome everyone and Jazakumullah khairan for being with us on this intensive course on the Maqasid methodology. Today is our final day, inshallah ta'ala, talking about the Re-Envisioning of Islamic Studies and the Maqasid Research Network and the next steps as well. Moving forward, I'm sure I've seen firsthand the passion and the excitement, mashallah, from everyone to want to join the research network and to want to apply the methodology and move forward in working collectively as a group in inshallah producing fruitful research for the ummah. This is the day where we discuss all of these details. Inshallah, I will have very important announcements throughout the day. Ramadan Mubarak for all of you, and may Allah Azza wa Jal make this Ramadan a Ramadan filled with barakah and mercy and khair for the ummah and upon you and your families. Allahumma ameen, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lift this suffering and injustices and corruption and the pandemic from the world. Allahumma ameen. Without further ado, Professor Jasser, Jazakallahu khairan, the floor is yours as we start the session.
Allah yahfazak. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أسعد الخلق وخاتم الرسل محمد صلى الله عليه وآله ورضي الله عن المهاجرين والأنصار ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين ثم أما بعد. Start with a Ramadan Mubarak for all of you, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this Ramadan a shift towards a better status, inshallah, for everybody individually and for this ummah, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this ummah move to a better place, a place where the people of taqwa and the people of ibadah and the people of justice are in a better situation and in a leadership situation, while the people of hypocrisy and corruption are in the margins. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us and to help us, inshallah, and to forgive our shortcomings and our foolishness and our misestimation or underestimation or overestimation of things. It's the nature of humanity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us weak. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with a tendency towards evil and towards good. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us guided towards the good and towards the wise and towards the right choices, inshallah, always. Jazakumullah khairan. And inshallah, this is the final session of the 4 sessions of our course, but it's not the final meeting between all of us or any of us. It's actually, inshallah, a start for a partnership in knowledge and research and brotherhood, sisterhood, however you like, between the participants. And from the Maqasid Institute's perspective, this is what we do in the start of our work, to agree on some ideas, and then we go from there to build partnerships, inshallah, and research projects and so on. I'm often asked the question, how does this methodology help the reality? And is this just a philosophy and a nice theory, or do you think that this could change the reality somehow? And I have an answer for that, which is today's first and second session. And then the third session will be your part of the answer, inshallah, on how we can change the reality. The answer of that in terms of how to change the reality, we have 3 circles: the circle of research, the circle of education, and the circle of action. And that is how ideas change reality. Ideas are very powerful. They are a very important industry. Unfortunately, it's an industry that is not very popular amongst Muslims because they think that ideas are said and done, and that whatever we produced in the past is what Islam is. But ideas are essential for us to move forward as Muslims and to contribute to today's civilization. So from the perspective of this institute, the Maqasid Institute, the ideas could transfer into research, could transfer into education and action. And these three circles are not necessarily in sequence. You could start with action and then try to look for research or education that help your action. You could start with education, but then you will need research in order to have the curricula that you educate people through. And you also need action in order to realize the education that you do. And you could start with research, which is what we do today, in order to create literature, to create a, let's say, a kind of like enough, how they say it, enough production of ideas to try to make a change. So these are the three circles that ideas could change the reality with. And the deeper the idea is, the more useful it is in changing the reality. People of practicality, people who are used to the popular culture of today, might not see the importance of ideas or the importance of education for that matter. And they think that everything is about action. But action without education is going to harm more than benefit. And education without research is going to harm more than benefit. And that's why we focus on research and we emphasize the theoretical side of that research. Theory, I'm using the English word of theory, that ties to Aristotle's theory. And Aristotle said that theory is knowledge for knowledge's sake. I don't mean theory in that sense, but just because I'm speaking English, I'm saying theory. But in Islam, this would be al-ilm, would be knowledge, or another, or the opinions. That's what I mean by theory, and I don't mean it in the Aristotelian sense, because in the Aristotelian sense, it generated in the Western culture a kind of myth that theoretical research is just knowledge for knowledge's sake after Aristotle. And people who are, of course, interested in theory are the people who hold the keys of navigating these societies. And they educate their kids, of course, to think about theories and to work with theories and to enter in the faculties of law and the faculties of philosophy and so forth, because this is how they change the society and rule the society. And they leave the immigrants in the applied kind of sciences for them to, to develop the applied parts of the machine. But where the machine is going and why the machine and so forth, this is theory, this is philosophy. So research in that sense does not have to be applied necessarily, it could be, but more importantly, research in terms of the ideas, because an idea could change the world. The institutions we live in were ideas, were simple ideas, but they were well researched and they went on to change the world. In order for research, education, and action to make a change, Islamic studies have to be redefined. And the current status of Islamic studies does not allow it to be an active agent of change in today's world. Islamic studies today is divided roughly into three categories. One category that you could call historical studies. So when you study hadith and tafsir and fiqh in the juridical sense, jurisprudence, and tarikh, history, and when you study that, you study the history of the sciences of hadith and the history of the sciences of tafsir. You go get a PhD in tafsir and you are comparing al-Tabari and the Zamakhshari in something, or you are analyzing al-Maqasid according to Ibn Ashur, or you are getting a PhD in tafsir, but you are not really doing Quranic studies. You are doing tafsir studies. This is different. Or you get a PhD in hadith and you specialized in Mursalat al-Hasan al-Basri, or wallahi, in the hadith you are specialized in الشاميين وروايات الشاميين وغيرهم, or you specialize in one of the aspects of tafsir, or Shuruh al-Bukhari, the commentaries on Bukhari, or something. And you are getting a PhD in hadith, but you have nothing to do with the sunnah itself, what the Prophet said, والسلام, and the content itself. And therefore, number one category of Islamic studies is what you can call historical studies. They are important, don't get me wrong, but they are not tied to the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, secondly, you have what is called al-fikr al-Islami, or Islamic thought. And these are a few departments that are in addition to the historical studies. So you get a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD in da'wah, let's say, or in Islamic finance, or in political theory or siyasa shari'ah, a few. And there is one or two departments I'm aware of Islamic architecture, or and so forth. So you are in the realm of Islamic thought, where a few of the current divisions of knowledge are taken from an Islamic point of view. So that's category number two. Category number three is Islamic studies in secular academia, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is a kind of neo-colonialist or neo-Orientalist studies, where you are actually studying Islam in terms of Muslims. You define Islam as Islamic law, and therefore you do Islamic studies because you study the imams of Islamic law, and you say that this is Islam. Or you define Islam in a historical way. So you are studying the history of the Ottomans from year this to year that, and this is your specialization. Or you study Islam in terms of the Islamic political movements or the Islamic societies, or Islam on the internet, or any of these themes. And it is all good, but this division does not take the Ummah forward and does not do justice to what Islam is about. Research in terms of history is important, but it's not the full story. Research in terms of the few areas that the Islamic thought, al-Fikr al-Islami, had started is important, but they lack the methodology and they lack the comprehensiveness that we talked about. And Islam in secular academia, East and West, is doing important research by researching the reality of Muslims, but researching the reality requires, number one, methodology, which is usually a methodology that comes from a deconstructionist approach or a positivist approach or any of the approaches in Western academia, and is not usually a normative methodology. Or, people say that they do confessional studies, which means that I am Muslim, but my approach is not really Islamic necessarily, but I'm Muslim, and this appears in my, and there is a growing trend in secular academia for Muslim scholars wanting to find a methodology that departs from the good old school that they come from, let's say from studying justice according to Rawls, or studying society according to Foucault, or any of that. Muslim scholars in secular academia are wanting or needing, from my assessment, needing this kind of methodology. Now, what do we propose in terms of an Islamic division of knowledge? Division of knowledge is a long story. And of course, Aristotle, again, had the most impact in history in terms of the division of knowledge. His division between theory and applied, and the categories that he divided knowledge according to. And we have a number of scholars in Islam who just copied Aristotle, Al-Farabi, and so forth, Ibn Sina. And there are scholars like Ibn Khaldun and Ibn Hazm and Ibn Taymiyyah and others who really tried to reclassify knowledge. The reclassification of Ibn Khaldun and Ibn Hazm and so on is quickly irrelevant, really, for today. When they, for example, did not understand the difference between chemistry and magic, for example. And that's why Ibn Hazm put chemistry and magic in the or the harmful kind of science, or the forbidden science. Ibn Khaldun, when he divided knowledge into aqli and naqli, that division that suited his time and his approach is no longer really applied today, because there is a lot of aqli in any naqli exercise or any naqli knowledge, and there is a lot of naqli that should apply to any aqli knowledge. But they had this myth that the aqli knowledge is neutral in terms of Islam. I'm talking about Ibn Hazm and Ibn Khaldun particularly. And they think that once you talk philosophy or design or engineering or astronomy or political theory or any of that, they think that this is neutral. لكل ummah, they said, every ummah has this, and this is a common kind of knowledge. It's not true, because when you study politics, there is a philosophy behind that. This is not neutral, and this is not for every knowledge and every civilization. And when you study economics, that is not neutral. There is so much value, so much faith, so much assumptions that you bring to the study of economics or psychology and so forth. Now, I missed to say that, on the other hand, in the dunya categories, so we divide the Islamic studies today into two categories: Islamic studies and civil studies or secular studies. And this division by itself is secular, is not Islamic. Islam doesn't have that. Now, if you go to the secular studies or civil studies in any university other than the Islamic university, so Islamic universities aside, you go to here, University of Toronto or Cairo University or whatever it is, the usual national university anywhere, the Arab world, in the Muslim world, in Africa, and whatever, in Europe. What you study is usually under four categories. You have humanities, and you have social sciences, and you have natural sciences and applied sciences. And people could debate one or the other of the categories. Humanities, people study philosophy and arts and music and language and the like. Natural sciences, people get into physics and chemistry and zoology and whatever, so forth. Applied sciences, people get into engineering and computer science, mathematics sometimes, etc. And people get into social sciences to study economics and sociology and so on. Where is religion? Religion is usually under social sciences, or theology is under humanities, or you do a little bit of religion if you do an applied science and your area is has to do with religion and so forth. So religion is not in the current secular division of sciences. Religion is not a methodology, and religion is not a mother science. Philosophy could be a mother science from their perspective, because philosophy is a methodology science. You study philosophy of sociology and philosophy of political science, political philosophy. You study jurisprudence for the philosophy of law. You study and so forth. So philosophy is kind of a mother science, but religion is not. Religion is just one of the areas that you study if you want to be a priest, or in Islam, you want to be an imam or a chaplain or something of that sort. That is the civil, if you wish, or the secular mind that even most Muslims, including, I would say, most scholars, divide knowledge like that. So you want to study Islam, they will tell you go to the Islamic University and study the history of Islam. You want to study sociology, they tell you, okay, let's find you a place in Europe or a place in one of the secular universities. And there were attempts, as you all know, of trying to bridge this gap. The Islamic University in Malaysia, for example, and mashallah, we have a number of members. we have Prof. Fauzan, and we have a number of professors here from the International Islamic University of Malaysia, is one of the important attempts to bridge this gap. And the Islamic University in Pakistan, and there are a number of attempts in the Arab world, etc. But these attempts, as we mentioned throughout this course, would require a critique in terms of methodology. What is the approach? IIUM, for example, or USIM, or any of the universities in Malaysia that talk about aqli and naqli, and I gave once a long lecture in USIM about that. What do you mean by aqli? And does it separate the naqli from your aqli? And what do you mean by naqli? And what does it separate aqli? And do you mean by naqli historical, or you mean by naqli al-Quran wa Sunnah? That's a different story. And if we all agree on the Quran and Sunnah, how to approach the Quran and Sunnah, which is exactly what we have been discussing over the past while. So with all due respect of the current attempts, including the Maqasid Institute initiatives that we try, we have this program that we mentioned a couple of times in South Africa, giving a master's in Islamic thought. We have Dr. Zaid Barzanji here, who is the vice president of that college in South Africa. And of course, the executive director of Maqasid Institute. And what we're trying to do through that, and you can ask Dr. Zaid about more details, is to try to bridge this gap. We offer a degree called Applied Islamic Thought. So Islamic thought, but applied. And therefore, every student has to pick a topic of application, something in the society, racism, family, mosques, etc., and then write a thesis in order to do the applied. And we think that this methodology could be a platform to go there. Now, division of knowledge, back to the division of knowledge, it's essential that we divide knowledge in a contemporary way. And the way we think about that is this, that we think that we could divide knowledge into 4 circles that are intersecting, and each of them would include a number of sciences. And all of them would take a Maqasid methodology approach in order to deal with them. Number 1, what we call usuli studies, 2, disciplinary studies, 3, phenomena studies, and 4, strategic studies. And I will briefly give, inshallah, some highlights on this, and more details we can send you, inshallah, in the write-ups and the other books and so on that we write about this. Usuli studies are the studies that should take this methodology to heart, but we are applying the Quran and Sunnah to the study of the Quran and Sunnah. So we should develop, for example, the study of tafsir in order to include the Maqasid methodology in the tafsir sciences. How do you do that? You could study the history of tafsir, but then you will analyze the different trends and schools, and you will analyze the Quran through that methodology. Hadith studies is one of those usuli studies. You go back to the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of the Hadith, and then you apply the Maqasid methodology to both al-sanad and al-matn, the dirasat al-sanad, the studies of change of narrators, as well as the studies of the content of the narrators. And we think that it's very important that we do that. Usuli studies in terms of usul al-fiqh. So we have the body that's called usul al-fiqh, and I think it is enough for developing the ahkam or the rulings in the sha'air, in the ritualistic part of Islam. Usul al-fiqh are a special case of the Maqasid methodology, in my view. They are perfect to derive the ahkam al-ta'abudiyya and the ahkam al-sha'airiyya. If you want to talk about salah and zakah and hajj and so forth, usul al-fiqh could be an approach that fulfills the sha'air or the ritualistic part of Islam. If you want to apply Islam to disciplines like medicine and arts and sociology, now that's a different story. You want to apply Islam to phenomena like poverty and pandemics, no, that is not, usul studies are not enough here. Usul al-fiqh, usul al-hadith, usul al-tafsir. So we're talking about the fundamental theories. Usul al-kalam, or the Islamic philosophy, some people differentiate between both, is basically the philosophy of the faith, the Islamic faith. We should not continue to teach and study kalam or philosophy, Islamic philosophy of religion, really, in terms of Mu'tazila and the Ash'ari and the Zaydiyya and so forth. And no, this should be the history of Kalam. But Kalam today is about studying the philosophies of faith or faith systems that are different from the Islamic perspective. To study secularism and Darwinism and positivism and relativism and Freudism and whatever it is that people bring that is a Kalami issue, Kalam in the sense of philosophy of religion. This should be part of the Usuli studies. Part of the Usuli studies also is the Usul of every science, what they call in the Western sense, the philosophy of the science. So philosophy of engineering, philosophy of politics. This is the area of intersection here between the Usul and the disciplinary studies. Usul al-Lugha al-Arabiyya, for example, the fundamental theory of the Arabic language, is an intersection between the Usuli studies and disciplinary studies in terms of linguistics. But Usul al-Lugha al-Arabiyya has to come from the Quran. Very surprised sometimes that people apply Sibawayh and Al-Zamakhshari and you name it on the Quran rather than applying the Quran on them. Because are there differences? Yes, sometimes the Quran has different kind of approaches to grammar or different kind of structures of sentences. And the Arabic of the Quran should be the standard of theories in the Arabic language. Now, secondly, disciplinary studies. Now, when we divide sciences, we take religion out of all of these sciences because religion for us is Islam, and Islam is not a theology. Islam is totally out of that system. And then, yes, people divide studies into those four categories: humanities, social, natural, and applied sciences. But what we propose here is a number of things. One is multidisciplinarity, which is a trend growing. I got my PhD from Canada in the secular education system in a multidisciplinary degree. But to go beyond disciplines, usually multidisciplinarity is about 2 or maximum 3 disciplines that you combine. But what we want to do here is to open disciplines to all disciplines that apply. And therefore, we want to move from disciplinarity and the strict boundaries of discipline. Oh, this is biology and not chemistry. Okay, let's think about biochemistry, and let's open biochemistry to other ideas and other sciences, because yes, there are other sciences that can contribute to your biochemistry research. And then let's go from multidisciplinarity to transdisciplinarity. In other words, let us try to diffuse the boundaries between the disciplines. And of course, this will require a lot of minds, and will require research, and will require pedagogical changes and university changes in terms of structure and standards and so forth. And of course, we are caught in the standards that keep the status quo, the standards of journals and the standards of promotions, East and West, Muslim and non-Muslim. We are caught in a system that is designed very well in order to keep the methodology in a certain box within secular methodology. And therefore, it's going to be a bit of a challenge when an Islamic university decides not to be accredited according to whatever the journal's accreditation and the university standards that are usually top down. And it might require some creativity in order to still tell the UN that we are doing all right, but to also be Islamic. And this is a challenge. We had a course once in Indonesia about that I taught with Dr. Ali Abdul Munaim, our director of Maqasid Institute in Indonesia, on we did it in the Islamic University, one of the Islamic universities there, I think it was in Jakarta, on the standards of the university, like how to accredit a university from a Maqasid point of view. And then we tried to bridge the gap. Now, disciplinary studies have to go beyond disciplines to multidisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity. Transdisciplinarity has a lot of intersection with what we call here phenomena studies. This is not new. Already some countries like Finland and other countries are bringing more phenomena studies even to the classroom of the children in schools, not just universities. But what we propose here as a step forward for Islamic studies is for phenomena studies to take more prominence in the Islamic research. it is essential that we study phenomena from an Islamic point of view and not be boxed in the disciplines. When you study the discipline, you have to reconstruct the discipline. There is talk about that beyond the scope of this lecture and the minutes allowed to me. And I can send you, inshallah, some ideas on how to reconstruct the discipline. Quickly, if you take the 7 elements, if you take the concepts, if you get into the concepts of the system, of your discipline, and you reconstruct the concepts, you are reconstructing a major part of the discipline. Because the concepts, every discipline is made out of a number of concepts. Every discipline has objectives. If you go and try to apply the maqasid instead of the objectives of the discipline, you will start to reconstruct the discipline. Every discipline defines groups in a particular way and defines values and defines, good and evil and beauty and ugly, and has its own set of commands and whole sets of universal laws or meta laws. Every discipline has meta laws. We talked yesterday about the progress of civilization, for example. They talk about growth in economics. They talk about meta theories that they think are done and are necessarily what the meta laws of the universe are. But the Sunnah al-Ilahiyya might not be compatible with this. Sunnah al-Ilahiyya are not compatible, to say, for one thing that I personally researched. Sunnah al-Ilahiyya is not compatible with the progress of civilization theory, because Sunnah al-Ilahiyya is saying that we are in cycles, always up and down. Not that civilization started from a stone age and progressed. People before us were more civilized and they had better institutions and better structures and higher technology. It's the different talk. But basically, to deconstruct, or rather reconstruct, the disciplines and fuse that into phenomena studies. Strategic studies, finally, which I will give, inshallah, more minutes in the next session, are very important on 2 levels. One, the level of thinking for these things. For the usuli studies, disciplinary studies, and phenomena studies, that requires strategy. And without strategy, without knowing where we are going, and without seeing the bigger picture, it is going to be quite problematic. That's why strategic studies are the most complex, but are very important. Strategic studies are important also for the Ummah, because the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as I mentioned, I think yesterday, doesn't have strategies. Nobody is strategizing for the Ummah. Every movement is strategizing for itself. Every university is strategizing for its own agenda, which is fine. Every country is strategizing for the best of the people of that nation state, but nobody is taking a step back and saying, okay, where is the Ummah going? The Ummah of Muhammad, East and West, minorities and majorities. Where are we going? And how can we change the course of the Ummah into taking the role that the Ummah is supposed to take as witnesses over humankind? We are supposed to be witnesses in the sense that we define beauty and ugliness. We define, benefit and harm. We are supposed to define these things. But every index that defines benefit and harm, or defines beauty and ugliness, or defines whatever it is useful and harmful, moral and immoral, every index is not coming from the Islamic point of view. And it is essential that we go back to the drawing board and think about research in terms of these 4 disciplines, and then how to translate the educational projects, that research projects, into educational projects, in order for our educational institutions that would like to be Islamic to contribute to Islam, not just in the historical sense, but also in the disciplinary sense and phenomena sense and strategic sense. And finally, for our Islamic institutions to take from the education that we produce and the research that we produce in order to create an Islamic action that is authentic and that is based on research and based on education. So I hope that this introduction covers the main points. Jazakumullah khair. Q&A, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Professor, Jazakallahu khairan. Very insightful. And inshallah, we'll move into the discussion period now. So you can use the raise hand function to contribute. I see Sayyid Jamaluddin followed by Sister Lisa. Sayyid Jamaluddin, تفضل.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear Professor Auda and Dr. Azam and all distinguished scholars and participants. Thank you for a great presentation, Professor Auda. I was really thinking about one thing that I wanted to just get some nasiha from you, because you were speaking about in the beginning about, we need about action and research and, all of these aspects, which is very beneficial. But I feel sometimes that the research is spoken in a language that the ordinary Muslim don't relate to or don't understand. It almost becomes elitistic. And I feel sometimes it's very important with some action-oriented research. You know what I'm saying? You were speaking about in Finland and the phenomenal studies that they're doing it outside the academical walls. They're in the field. I really like that because then it's applicable in a different way. So my question is, how can we use a language, like I'm not a researcher yet, but that I'm aspiring to be, but for all of us, how can we use a language so that it's applicable for the ordinary Muslim, so we don't speak over the head? You understand what I'm saying, Professor Auda? I hope you understand.
Very well. Of course. Allah bless you, Akhi. I do understand, because there is a huge gap between the ordinary Muslim and the ordinary human in general and the realm of ideas. The ordinary human, because of the educational systems, is not a thinking human. The educational systems could produce a thinking human if that human comes from the elite of the society. And therefore, the elite makes sure that their kids think and take life seriously and don't waste their life on social media and so on and do sports. And, they're elite, they raise their kids. But the rest of humanity that's left to the system becomes so far from complex thinking. And now it is a disaster in terms of the way social media is shaping people's minds. How? By education. And education has different levels. One level is the media. If you create media, well, people want really a lot of action and colors and joking and so on in order to absorb any information. Okay, let's create some videos that do that and give an idea and appeal to the the ADHD population. You see, like if this is going to be what you want to do in terms of media. But part of education is also serious education, is also a higher level education. PhDs and masters and so on do change societies if they are written well, if they create thought that is well researched and that really addresses issues. And then the ordinary Muslim perhaps will eventually, when you create enough research and research becomes education, textbooks, the ordinary person is going to study the textbook because they want to pass the exam and get a job and this kind of thing. And that's when the textbook starts to change their minds about issues. The ordinary person doesn't care about any theory, but they have to study in university in order for them to get jobs. I'm talking about the non-thinking part of the society. So education is important, and formal education, if we can create formal education certificates and degrees and so on that people think they will get in order to be employed, this is one way, one side of the change that you need to do. But you also have to create educational institutes that do not necessarily appeal to the market, because the real change is not going to happen by creating a nice officer who goes and works in one of those globalized companies. Yeah, that is one product, which is the usual product today. But other than that, you also have to find reasonable people who are willing to give up some of the authority and power that they have and support education that creates minds, that creates thinking people, which is not the favorite product or outcome for businesses or governments. They don't like that. They don't like thinking people, again, except for the elite. So in order to produce that thinking person out of the educational institute, the education institute has to be supported by people who believe in the ideology, who believe that we're going to put, like here in Carleton, for example, in Ottawa, that's like $20 million in the Center for Israeli Studies, because you want to change the society. So you are actually promoting quote unquote Israeli studies by giving those $20 million to the university. That's how the world functions. But if you want to promote Islamic studies, which is a center we have here in the university, it is dying to just pay the two professors their salaries, because people do not think that it is a good cause. They could spend $5 million on the nearby mosque, but they don't want to spend $50,000 on the Center for Islamic Studies. So this kind of thing, how to change the reality, I think part of it has to be by word of mouth kind of thing, because broadcast is an industry, and you really cannot, any minute you get on CNN or ABC or Fox News, there is a political price for this. And there is this is not a neutral game. Media is not looking for the best stories in the society. Of course not. These are companies that have interests, you see, and if we are not aware of that, then we're in big trouble. So what is a success story and why is it on air is because of the political and economic interests. So my point is, forget about the mass media, and the mass media shapes the social media in general, and try to get into the word of mouth kind of person to person. And that's how change happens. And it is enough if you have a core number of people who would like to make a change, for change to happen. Change doesn't have to happen by 90% of Muslims being aware of what Islam is about. It could happen. The Prophet ﷺ changed history with those 10,000 Sahabi. But it really depends on the quality of the men and women that you are talking about. I hope this answers your question, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan, Professor. Thank you so much.
Barakallah feek, akhi Sayyid. I would like to just read from the discussion, Dr. Zaid. There was a discussion on the same topic. Maqasid Institute wants to institutionalize the process from ideas to action and to suitably communicate our Islah attempt to humanity. Inshallah, Allah jazeek al khair. Sister Lisa, please.
Yes, mashallah, jazakallah khair, Prof. Jasser, Auda, for the very inspiring session. So, Prof, I actually have one question. So, we are in Islamic economic and finance usually being criticized if we are doing research using non-quantitative. I mean, the most people in Islamic economic and finance still using positivist philosophy. So they critics that if we do research other than using quantitative, it is like kind of less robust and less credible. So how we have to deal with this kind of critics? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sister Lisa. Wallahi, it's a problem. It's a problem that people use Maqasid al-Sharia. I'm aware of that, by the way, in Indonesia. I was in a seminar a few days ago. It was very clear to me from the discussions that people use Maqasid al-Sharia to justify secular approaches to Islam because of the agendas, the Muslim world, whatever agendas we have. And it's quite unfortunate that we do that sometimes Maqasid al-Sharia is used in an apologetic way. Not sure if I see Dr. Misawi here. Is this brother Dr. Tahir? Would love to. Is this you, Prof. Tahir Misawi? Anyway, so mentioning Maqasid al-Sharia, we have you there. So we have scholars of Maqasid al-Sharia, mashallah, a number of them, but our dear brother Dr. Tahir Misawi could tell you about that when you read his writings on Maqasid al-Sharia, he is going to the genuine approach of not using Maqasid al-Sharia for the good old days economics and the good old days law. No, I mean, Maqasid al-Sharia is supposed to bring a change. So I'm aware of what you're saying, sister, of using the Maqasid and then insisting on what you called the quantitative measures or the positivist measures, and this becomes under al-hiyal, and Prof. Tahir talked about that in his book on Ibn Ashur, And there is a major section on al-hiyal, or the legal tricks or the legal circumventions. When you read about that, you realize that Maqasid is not about the legal circumventions and the legal tricks. And it is supposed to be a genuine approach. Not sure. Yeah, here he is. I think I can't see, but I would like for him to comment on this. Please, Dr. Tahir, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Tahir.
Yeah, I think it's Bagus. Okay, maybe I didn't see the name properly. Anyway, so yeah, you're right, sister. I think it's very important that we are aware of that. How to change that is changing the policy of the university, and changing the university policy would require basically leadership action in terms of the research agenda of the university. What do we mean by Maqasid al-Sharia when we do research? What do we mean by Islamic finances? Are we genuine in terms of the Islamic economics, or it's just a good old neoliberal school, but we are putting a hijab on it, or just putting a hat on it, but it's the good old neoliberal school. So that is important, inshallah. Allah alam.
Barakallah fikum, Professor. Professor, I have a question. You mentioned that there's been some attempts to institutionalize and reclassify knowledge from an Islamic worldview, and you referenced the Malaysian and the Pakistani models. What makes this classification or this attempt different? What are the challenges that were faced by our brothers and sisters in Malaysia and Pakistan when they did this, and how does the Maqasid attempt try to address and solve these issues?
Well, Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. Yani, the Islamization of knowledge project is a very important project. I talked about it in the, I guess, first lecture. Islamization of knowledge is a very important project. There are a number of streams under that, and the Maqasid methodology, I consider it to be a continuation or a build-up on that attempt, even though it is different. Different in what sense? Professor Al-Faruqi, rahimahullah, Shaheed Ismail Al-Faruqi, he proposed that the student of Islamic studies study in two sciences, a science that is Shari and a science of the dunya, or a secular science. So you go and study the Shari, and he meant by the Shari al-fiqh. So you go study Sharia, you're going to study one of the madhahib al-fiqh. And you're going to study one of the social sciences, like any of the worldly sciences, you're going to study them in the secular sense. And he thought that if you do that, then you can start to Islamize knowledge, because now the Maqasid methodology approach differs with that, because these are two different methodologies. This is a historical Islamic methodology, and this is a secular positivist methodology. Now, Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, for example, as another variation, another president of the IIIT, one of our ustads too, Allah yahfazu, his proposal was, well, this works only in social sciences. And Islamization of knowledge is not for natural sciences and not for applied sciences, because these are neutral. We don't believe in that. We don't believe that chemistry and physics and engineering is neutral, because there is a lot of philosophy there, and we can talk about it. And his approach to social sciences was a similar approach, even though he started to talk about the integration of sciences rather than the Islamization. So Dr. Abu Sulaiman took the project further towards integration. And of course, Dr. Najib Al-Attas of Malaysia contributed a lot to the integration approach. Now, Sheikh Taha Al-Alwani, also our Ustad and our Sheikh, rahimahullah, he went back to the Quran and looked for al-wahda al-bina'iyya, or the structure of the Quran and so forth, unifying structure. And he had some very good ideas, but he did not, rahimahullah, apply, from what I know from him, and I attended his lectures back in Cairo, was one of my Ustads. I do not know that he published anything in which he applied the Maqasid al-Quran that he theorized for to knowledge itself, to sociology and political science and so on. I am not aware of that. And therefore, there are gaps still. The phenomenology that Dr. Farouqi took in his PhD as an approach, and eventually there are issues with phenomenology in terms of placing the human in the center of the information. I was just reading Dr. Farouqi's contribution to the Atlas of the World Religions yesterday. And the way he talked about the Egyptian religions or the pharaonic religions is actually based on the documents rather than the Quranic perspective. And the documents were interpreted by the British and by mostly like the French people who did Egyptology early on. And I see from his account of Egyptology and its history that he comes from the secular perspective rather than a lot of Egyptology that is in the Quran. You know, the Quran is full of information about the basic principles of Egyptology, if you want to really get into the Quran from that perspective. But Dr. Farouqi, when he wrote about Egyptology, he wrote it like an ethical British scholar, with all due respect to him and his martyrdom, rahimahullah. But I'm just criticizing his approach. So the Maqasid methodology, I believe, is a continuation of this. We're standing on the shoulders of giants anyway, and we're building on what they said. But I think the schism between aqli and naqli, the schism between natural and social sciences, the schism between phenomenology and reconstruction, or if you wish, or the ethical approach to Islam, these schisms, I believe that the Maqasid methodology could bridge. Allah a'lam. Oh, mashallah, I see Dr. Zaid here.
MashaAllah, impressive. Impressive. Yes, we have Dr. Zaid, our Executive Director of Maqasid, with us, and he has the floor now. Dr. Zaid.
Jazakumullah khair. I wanted to make a quick comment to the dear sister, my fellow economists there. Yes, the challenge appears to be big. And I always say that this is talbis iblis. I mean, this is the thing that sometimes Shaitan makes it as a big challenge. And the way to do it, like we say always, a big problem, break it down to small problems. And let's just simply give ourselves the chance to think about the concepts and this framework. And as we go through it, we will see the possibilities of what can be done to revitalize our fields. And within this, we understand like econometrics and all these quantitative tools. And this is what I've done. My thesis was all mathematical economics and econometrics studies, 10 years doing data science. So at the end of the day, these are tools. And the problem sometimes not with the tool, the problem is how we even start to think about what I want to do in life and how these tools supports what I want to do. So if we, even from a Maqasid perspective, if I conducted a research and I came up with some kind of proposed solutions that translates into an organizational strategy, that translates into a pilot test, well, I need to know some data on whether the pilot test actually has an impact in real life, if it is working, if it's not, so we can enhance it as we go further. So the system, there need to be a dynamic system, and this, what we're trying to institutionalize here, Maqasid Institute, is that here is a new way to start helping us think out of the box. Now, as we start thinking out of this box, that we are really, we are restrained into based on disciplines and even sometimes few multidisciplines. Once we start thinking outside that box, then it is okay to use the tools, the positive tools, or I don't want to call it really positive tools, maybe call these quantitative tools to support that objective. And inshallah, that can be a way to resolve this issue, because we are presenting an idea and we're backing it with evidence from real life. Wallahu alam.
جزاك الله خير أخي. جزاك الله خير دكتور. And by the way, for those interested in Islamic economics, Dr. Zaid, as he mentioned, in addition to being the executive director of Maqasid Institute, he is an economist, and his PhD is in the basics of economy and the theory. He is going to be teaching, inshallah, a course this summer in the International Peace College of South Africa on a Maqasid approach to economics. So we will announce to you, inshallah, in time if you would like to participate as a visiting student. We allow visiting students, not just our students in the master's program, just to announce and put more pressure on Akhi Dr. Zaid. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah feekum, Dr. Zaid.
I hope he doesn't mind visiting students. Just,
yeah.
okay.
Okay, I have in order Brother Bilal and Sayyid Jamaluddin, Sister Claire, and Dr. Umniya. MashaAllah, lots of points. I'm going to mention one thing, Professor Jasser. There is a comment in the chat by Brother Ahmad or Ashmad. He says many scholars, Islamic scholars in Indonesia, promote the secular approach on Maqasid study, and they frequently involve your name to justify it.
Yeah, I know, I know, and I'm very upset about that. And when I get a chance to speak, I really make it clear that this is not about deconstruction, and this is not about secularism. I received a paper once, one of the scholars in Indonesia, without mentioning names, wrote about me as some sort of the leader of deconstructionist movement in Indonesia. And I said, no, I'm not. I don't believe in deconstruction. I write against it. So please don't use my humble work on Maqasid al-Sharia to promote deconstructionism. And yes, reconstruction sounds like deconstruction, but this is a different approach. You are trying to reconstruct. And some people I attended in one of the seminars, some people are talking about me supporting a secular state and so forth. I said, I don't even believe in nation state, let alone secular state. So yes, please, for those who are in East Asia especially, I really appreciate your attention and the translations of the books. I really appreciate that. But I also please give a warning of misusing the Maqasid theory and the Maqasid works in order to promote particular agendas. Jazakallah khair.
وإياكم, Dr. Barakallah feekum. Okay, it's 9:01 right now. We're at time, but I'd like to give opportunity to my brothers and sisters to participate. So I'm going to ask my brothers to limit their contribution to 1 minute. Brother Bilal, Akhi Sheikh Sayyid, if you can maybe give opportunity to others who did not participate. Barakallah feek. Dr. Claire and Dr. Umniya, also 1 minute. So, Jazakallah khairan. Bilal?
Thank you. Looking at the outcome of a Maqasid methodology approach to a discipline as a new framework to deal with the subject, I was wondering, so I can understand the Maqasid, the outcome of a Maqasid methodology being a competition to existing uses of Maqasid. But my question is, what do you think we should be, or what is your opinion on the approach to existing Maqasid approaches? Should it just be ones that the approach from Maqasid methodology competes with and eventually surpasses? Or should you be antithetical to it or oppose it as part of, yeah, that's
yeah. Well, it's not antithetical or supportive of the current Maqasid studies. It just depends on how the approach is built. Some of the Maqasid studies are apologetic, as I mentioned, to wrong fundamentals and wrong concepts in the name of Maqasid. Of course, we'll be against that. Some of the Maqasid studies are partialistic, and they focus on one era of history or one author or something, or one part of the Maqasid, and they don't connect to the others. Would be against that. But some others are integrative, and this would be what we do. Some others, you see, so it's not about being with or against the Maqasid studies or the Salafi studies or the Sufi studies or any of the trends in today's Islamic thought. It's how the trend is approached. You could have a Salafi ideology, but how do you promote Salafism? Are you partialistic? Are you apologetic? Are you deconstructionist? then we are against that. Not because your name is Salafi, it's because you are partialistic. But if you are Salafi, but you are integrative, and you go beyond your partialism, then we agree with you, you see. So it's not about the names of the schools, but I think that the Maqasid studies today suffer from the same issues, the same methodological challenges that other schools suffer from. And that's why we try to add that. We're obviously part of Maqasid studies, but we're trying to add something new, inshallah. Allahu a'lam.
Barakallah fikum. Dr. Claire.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone from France. So thank you very much again for this very, very insightful and inspiring talk and questions that I heard today. I would just like to, I mean, there were many points that I would have loved to expound in a longer conversation, but I would just like to ask you about, so what you were saying about knowledge and the fact that, that there are different options that we can, I mean, with each of the Islamic sciences that we can do. The way I understood it is, if we take, for instance, the science of Kalam, we could have, for instance, an historical approach to Kalam, so the history of the sciences, etc. And I don't think all these options are exclusionary. And then there is the second approach which you mentioned, which I think you mentioned, if I understood your words correctly, which is Kalam as an option to move beyond, the current world order. So to a force of proposition, okay. And then there is a third option which I was thinking about, and I would like you perhaps to respond to, or is Kalam or any of the Islamic sciences as a force of critique, in the sense that, for instance, again coming from France. We have, I think, if we take the example of Al-Ghazali, before he went on into developing his philosophy, he started with a critique of the philosophers. And so I was thinking that perhaps today Muslims also should take on the critique of, let's say, Kant, or the critique of Foucault, but you see, from an Islamic perspective. And I was wondering if you had some more comments or thoughts about this third also function of yeah.
Well, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Claire, I totally agree with you. And yes, this is the way forward. Your third option, or your additional idea to critique, is very important. If you read, have you read Muhammad Abdullah Draz, D-R-A-Z? He had his PhD from the Sorbonne there in France, and his critique of the ethical theory of everybody is actually brilliant. And he comes from an approach that is very similar to the approach we're talking about. In fact, I consider myself to be the student of the students, obviously, of the students, no, one or two levels of students from Sheikh Abdullah Draz, and I would be honored to be considered. So Sheikh Draz, D-R-A-Z, when he wrote his PhD, from his perspective, if you read his tafsir of the Quran, partly written, called the Naba al-Azim, or the Good News, partly in audio, you'll find it on YouTube. His tafsir is a very integrative tafsir. And from his brilliance with the Quran, he came to the moral theory, and he criticized every philosopher there is that talked about morality from an Islamic point of view. So what you are saying is actually very important, and I think we need to build on the methodology and on the work of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Draz in terms of critique. And this is Kalam. Now, Kalam in the past, the Mu'tazila, they critiqued, the other schools. They started with Al-Qadariyya, Bani Umayyah, when the destinations, when they made this, and then they eventually got into the debates with the other groups anyway. So we have different groups today, and it's very important that we develop Al-Kalam so it deals with the different groups today on the philosophy level. So I agree with you, inshallah. But for a longer discussion, inshallah, we will have more seminars on these things. Obviously, these are just highlights. Inshallah, we'll have more would like for you to contribute, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Barakallah feekum. For the sake of time, we'll just take one more participation. Brother Bagos.
Assalamualaikum.
How are you, Prof?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Good to see you, Sidi. Good to see you. MashaAllah.
You remember me, Prof. Auda? Prof. Jasser? Auda?
Of course, we had long discussions. MashaAllah.
Sorry,
Please.
I don't hear the sound.
Please, yeah. Professor Bagus from Indonesia is a psychologist by training, but mashallah, is one of the founders of the Society of Muslim Psychologists, and his contributions in Islamic psychology from a Maqasid perspective are very important. For those who are in psychology, please read Professor Bagus. Please go ahead.
I think I'm not that.
Please go ahead.
I'm just intrigued with this deconstruction issue that you just mentioned and questioned by the other participant, because what I have done with the theories of motivation actually was started by deconstructing all those theories through its maybe you can say it's Maqasid, like for example Freudian, and then I after I break it down, I figure out that he is talking about instinct. He said that a human being has instinct and nobody else should forbid or regulate human being. Let human being do whatever they want, something like that. That's the for example. And then the maybe Maslow theory thing construct a theory about need hierarchy, but actually the philosophy is also freedom, but it's different from Freud. Freud is on the other, is from the instinct side, but the Maslow is from freedom for aspiration, like what do you want, things like that. So I did this construction. So what is wrong with that? I mean, like why you said that this deconstruction is something that we have to be careful or aware, not to to be a deconstructionist, and you say that something like that.
No, this is perfect. This is the deconstruction we want. But I was adding that after the deconstruction, we need to do reconstruction.
Oh, yes, yes.
You deconstructed the basic theories that are not Islamic, and I'm aware of some of your work, and I've read your papers, mashallah. And this deconstruction is very important. What we would like for you, Prof, to do is, okay, now we deconstructed them. How can we reconstruct? How can we build from an Islamic point of view? So instead of that theory of the human, how is the concept of the human in the Quran different? And therefore, how can we reconstruct the psychology based on a different concept of human, which is the work that you already did also in some of your other work.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm aware of. فَجَزَاكُمُ khair. So deconstruction is not always evil. Deconstruct however you want, but just stay away from the deconstruction of the wahi, of the revelation.
All right.
I criticized, like for example, the scholars, without mentioning names, who deconstruct al-wahi itself and the authority of the Quran. To give one name, like Muhammad Arkoon, for example, when he talks about the deconstruction of the authority of the Quran, that is not the right deconstruction, because Allah's words are not human. They are above that. And we cannot deconstruct the revelation. We can deconstruct any human theory from the Sahaba on, construct as you wish, but stay away from the Quran and Muhammad. Jazakumullah khair. No, nice meeting you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Barakallah feekum. Sister Emmy, I will note your name down for our next discussion period, inshallah ta'ala, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Allah yajzik al-khair. It's 9:14 right now, and it is time for our break. We'll be back at 9:19, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, and see you soon.
Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. Okay. Professor Jasser, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu rahmatullah.
حياكم الله. أهلا وسهلا.
الله يكرمك.
طيب, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Without further ado, inshallah, we'll start our second session. And before that, Professor, I just also wanted to highlight that we will be sending the survey at the end of today. Inshallah, it's very, very important that you fill it and participate in the questions there. What will happen today as well is we'll be sending a link for you at the end of the day to register for the research groups or network. If you have any technical difficulties, to also reach out to Dr. Ildus. And if you have any other questions about MS Teams or about the technical issues or logistical issues, please reach out to me, inshallah ta'ala. Finally, I am just awed with, alhamdulillah, with the amount of research scholars and activists with us today on this virtual and virtuous platform, analyzing and delving deep into the book of Allah Azza wa Jal and into the wahi and into the prophetic etiquette and hadi to extract meaningful and practical paradigms for us today in our world today. And I'm really hopeful that this group of researchers and scholars, inshallah, will introduce and induce positive change in the ummah, inshallah ta'ala. Professor Jasser, without further ado, the floor is yours, inshallah.
جزاك الله خير أخي. بارك الله فيك. بارك الله فيك. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وبعد. I will make this session, inshallah, briefer than usual because I would like for us to interact more, and I want to give as much time as possible for the presentation on the way forward in terms of the research groups and so forth, and discussion and seminar groups that we would like to form. I wanted to share a piece of news with my brothers and sisters here, because for people who write books, which is a good number of you here, you know very well that when you write a book and the book is born, is like a child that is born. It takes its life and it grows and it becomes something, especially if it's not just a paper that you write in a weekend, like it's a book that you spend years working on. So this morning, actually, I received news of the publishing of my new book in English. So I will just share this with you. I know that it was not part of the program, Dr. Azzam, but I wanted to share.
No, please. And Mubarak on behalf of everyone here. I'm sure we're all excited. Mubarak, inshallah.
الله يكرمك يتربى في عزك يعني إن شاء الله.
So this is son or daughter number what?
No, I don't know how many. No. So Re-Envisioning Islamic Scholarship, Maqasid methodology as a new approach. That is something that, alhamdulillah, the Maqasid Institute has co-published with Claritas, is a publisher in the UK, well known. I mean, they published a number of many other books. And alhamdulillah, we collaborated with them on this product here. And we should be sending you links if you would like to order this book. This book is what I detail a lot of the ideas that I mentioned with you. And inshallah, I hope that the feedback that I get from you and the discussions that go around this book when we launch it, inshallah, and we have discussions on it, hopefully that this would be, inshallah, useful. It's meant to introduce these ideas that we shared. And as you see, even from the cover of the book, this unusual kind of approach that tries to bring some renewal, inshallah, and some new ideas. I would like to talk about strategy because it's very important to strategize for the change that we would like to cause, inshallah, in the Ummah. When you strategize from the Maqasid methodology perspective, it is very important to assess the reality in a complex way and to deal with complexity in a way that rises above the needs of the public and so on, which are very important, and the immediate crises and so on, the crisis management that we have been doing as an Ummah and as Islamic organizations and Islamic institutions. Most of the work that I'm aware of, and I've participated in dozens of institutions and Muslim student institutions and scholarly and fatwa bodies and so forth, most of the work we do is kind of a crisis management kind of thing. Putting out fires everywhere and dealing with crisis. It's very important to take a step back and think strategically for the Ummah. To think strategically, we need to describe the reality in a compound way. And I think that the framework that we put here for our discussion is a framework that could help us describe the reality. If you look at the reality in terms of concepts, there is a difference between defining a society as interest groups, business people, politicians, celebrities, employees, etc. You're defining a society in a particular way, civil society organizations, versus defining a society according to the concepts and therefore the groups that you have in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, in terms of reformers and corruptors, in terms of people of authority, but what kind of authority and how they're using it, and in terms of the universal laws of that society. How is the society changing and how can we change it? It doesn't mean that you avoid the descriptives of the reality, but it means that your framework should be hegemonic over the current framework. The framework that you build based on your study of the revelation should govern the framework that other people propose. Prof. Bagos, for example, in the Q&A talked about the Freudian framework, and he comes from a Maqasid framework trying to judge the Freudian framework. What is right and what is not? What do we take from that framework and what do we leave from the Freudian framework? Any human idea or philosophy will have some benefits in it and will have some sound sides of it, right? But if you build a framework that is independent from the hegemonic framework of the reality, and then you take it and try to change the reality based on it, that is when you start to think strategically and think long-term and think in terms of how this could be translated into institutions and so forth. And there could be new ideas that change the reality. We talked about al-waqf, for example, endowments, as an idea that could change a lot of the models for financing Islamic education and Islamic movements and Islamic action in general, and how al-waqf could really make a difference in terms of the impact of the society and the ummah. We discussed a number of other ideas, albeit briefly, in terms of how to build this framework that change how we look at the reality. And when we look at the reality through that framework, and we start to judge what people think are meta laws based on the universal laws, and judge what people think are the concepts that they deal with and the groups they describe and the categories they classify things according to, from the Islamic perspective, you step out of the reality a little bit, not to isolate yourself, but in order to come back and change that reality towards a different framework. When you look at the logic that people use today versus the proofs, we didn't talk much about proofs in this course. When you look at the logic, it's a logic of majority, kind of overwhelming, whatever makes hashtags popular, whatever, becomes a fact, versus a logic that thinks differently, that has what the Quran calls burhan, or the proof or the sign differently. And therefore, I have burhan about something, even if it's not the popular opinion, or the majority of people on the internet do not really know about it or do not think that it's an issue. And then how to reach a conclusion that something is truth, and how this truth becomes at the core of your approach to strategy. Strategic studies today are mostly done for hegemonic purposes of certain races over other races, of certain nations over other nations, and so forth. And strategic studies, I haven't come across studies that look at humanity in general, strategizes for humanity, let alone strategize for the Muslim Ummah, let alone strategize for what Islam should be in the world. It is very important that we take this at the levels of strategy, in addition to the applied levels and the curriculum design and the education, and as well as research and so on in terms of phenomena. It's also important, but it's also important not to overlook strategic studies in the sense of how can we strategize for the Ummah? How can the Ummah itself move forward based on a worldview that comes from the Islamic perspective? This course and this book and these attempts that we do, all of us in the Maqasid Institute, is actually a call to a new worldview, a different approach. And a new worldview will mean different ways of approaching sciences and different ways of dealing with knowledge and education and so on. And it's not a totally new worldview, because we're going back to the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad ﷺ, but we're looking at them differently, at a different depth, in order to construct a paradigm that is different from the current paradigm, that shifts the current paradigm towards a more humane, and before humane, a more godly, a more God-conscious, a more Rabbani, if you want to speak in the Quranic terms, a more Rabbani paradigm, an Ilahi paradigm. And it is very important to make this shift. And this shift is not just in the Islamic movements, but it's also in the Islamic knowledge. And it is not just in the religious knowledge, it is also in the disciplinary and professional and phenomena studies knowledge. And it is not just for humanities and social sciences, it is also for natural sciences. To give a couple examples, for those who asked about the natural sciences approach, what difference would it make? Current science, for example, doesn't think that the universe is purposeful. But the Maqasid approach, at the heart of it, believes that this universe is purposeful and everything in it is purposeful. Analyze only in the Quran the talk about mountains. Only, you see how Allah talks about mountains. Mountains have memory and have a will and have, it's fantastic. And this is not philosophy, because if you think of the mountain as a living entity, that is a different approach to the world from thinking of the mountain as a group of rocks that you can destroy, whatever, in order to build a 5-star hotel, as they did in Mecca. You see, that's a very different approach to mountains. When you think of the animal as an intelligent being that has technology that is more advanced than us, which is true. I was talking yesterday about the Canadian ducks, watching them going to South America and back. They're more intelligent than me. I cannot do that on my own. I cannot navigate with the stars, as you know, our cat, when he got lost and then he came back navigating the stars. The cat was able to see the location. So when I look at animals as more advanced kind of creature and model for technology, that is a different technology. Sciences do not think that nature is purposeful, and do not think that even humans are conscious. I studied a little bit of neuroscience in my background, and in neuroscience, they define consciousness as an activity in the brain. You see, they don't define consciousness as we define it in our nafs or our ruh Ruh is a different story, but nafs, they don't define it like that. And they don't think that even humans are conscious. And those who believe that humans are conscious do not believe that animals are conscious. And those who believe that animals are conscious do not believe that atoms are conscious or genetics are conscious. And they are shocked when the genetics make a smart choice, or when the cell behaves intelligently, or when the plant takes a different route to achieve the same objective and grow in a particular way that is intelligent, that looks, the plant doesn't have neurons and chemistry, but the plant is intelligent. And when you block a certain thing, it goes around your block. That is intelligence by definition. So when you look at nature differently, civilization did not start from a stone age. Allah told Adam all the names, taught Adam all the names. And language did not start with a prototype or a proto or one of those things, because Allah gave Adam all the names and humanity had a language and books. The Prophet ﷺ talked about the suhuf, the sheets or the documents or the scripts of Sheeth, the son of Adam, and Idris, the grandson of Adam. So they had books. They were not living in a stone age. They live in a civilization. Well, civilizations, where did it go? They go up and down. That is a universal law. That is a different approach to history and anthropology and psychology and language and social sciences altogether from the current approach that thinks that we were some sort of apes, and then apes all of a sudden shifted into Homo sapiens, and then Homo sapiens started with a proto-language, and the Egyptians invented religion, which is not true, and the Iraqis invented law, which is not true, and so forth. No, this is not what happened. Adam and Noah and Idris and so forth have a very different history and a very different science for us to look at. So the universe, when you look at it from a scientific perspective, we're not saying that we're going to design a different kind of telescope from the Islamic point of view. But when you look at the universe and see it as an architecture that Allah built in a way that the Quran describes, you will use the telescope in a different way, and you will interpret what's happening in a different way. And we're not going to say we will do with experimental logic. Experimental logic is very important to do something in the lab. But when you enter the lab, what kind of philosophy you bring to the lab? What kind of pre-assumptions you have as you test on this animal or on that human and so forth? How do you define the human? Do you define the human in a Freudian way, and therefore it's a different human from Islam? You define it in a neoliberal way as the greedy, all-aware kind of consumer. This is an economic definition of the human. In Islam, we define the human differently. Do you define the human as the anthropology people do in the Homo sapien sense and the progress of civilization kind of sense? Or is the human a complex entity that consists of objectives and concepts and universal laws and all of that? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined the human in a way that is beyond our full comprehension, but not beyond our study. And when we study the human and study society and civilization and study governance and study economics and study everything from the perspective of the word of Allah and the Sunnah of Muhammad, when we break the taboo and the ice of Muslims touching the Quran, opening it and reading it and understanding it, not just reading it for a letter gives you 10 hasanat and so on. You can do this when you're a child, and you tell your child, when you read Qul Huwallahu Ahad, you will have 1,000 hasana. But when you're an adult and when you're a scientist, you cannot just do that. You read the Quran, you have to يعقل. أفلا تعقلون? Don't you reflect upon what you read? So when you read and open, you have to realize that this is real. Yes, animals are communities like us. This is real. This is not allegorical. And yes, the mountain has a category. And the Prophet ﷺ said that he loves Uhud and Uhud loves him back. Yes, it's true. And this is a different worldview that has a different definition of the material world and the social world, the different definition of humanity and progress of civilization. And when we approach the Quran and the Sunnah this way, we are able then to reconstruct, re-envision, as this book is saying, re-envisioning Islamic scholarship. And I think there is a lot of good for humanity when we do that. Humanity needs the contribution of Muslims, because humanity now is trapped in a number of interests and a number of systems that is very difficult to come out from. And I think that Muslims and Islam particularly could contribute a lot of good ideas for humanity forward. And when we introduce a different paradigm, I think that humanity will benefit from what we introduce. Whether they believe or not, become Muslim or not, is their choice. No compulsion in religion. But I think that Islam is for everybody. Islam is not just for Muslims. And the way Islam approaches the human and language and history and society is not just for Muslims. It is for everybody. And inshallah, we can contribute something that is a useful knowledge that we leave behind, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala counts for us when we meet with him. Jazakumullah khair wa barakallahu feekum. I really appreciate each and every one of you here. Those who contributed to our comments and discussions, I really appreciate, and those who did not, and those who communicated via email or with the Maqasid Institute staff, please continue to be in touch. Jazakumullah khair. And inshallah, we'll have a discussion, but inshallah, it's the floor for you now to contribute to this, and for the Maqasid Institute admin to take it from here, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Professor. Jazakallahu khairan. And subhanallah, the point that you ended with, that the world needs us. The world is in dire need of rescue, and it's our duty as Muslims and learned Muslims and learned research scholars to really take the baton and assume the responsibility and assume this khilaf. Allah Azza wa Jalla use us, inshallah. And hopefully, and I'm, as I said, very hopeful and optimistic of this, mashallah, blessed gathering and blessed group of scholars and researchers to fulfill that amana, inshallah, to the world on behalf of Islam. طيب, we enter into our discussion period right now, and I give priority to my sister Emi, and also Dr. Mahmoudo. He messaged me right after the period before. So these two, Sister Emi, are you with us?
I have to use Dr. Bagu's
Please.
gadget because I got kicked out from the Zoom.
No problem. Please go ahead.
No,
thank you.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. It's good to see you, Prof. MashaAllah.
I'm not Professor
Prof Bagus and Prof Emi are those academic couples that people look at. MashaAllah.
We live in the same house.
Yeah, MashaAllah. Yeah. We have an academic couple here too. MashaAllah. Please go ahead. Go ahead, sister. MashaAllah.
So I have this question regarding research when we use the Maqasid approach, Professor Auda. So are we going to develop research with our very own method for observation, or how is it the Maqasid approach is it going to lend itself for observation that we normally use in our discipline like psychology? For example, now we are thinking of building a Quranic concept of family relations, because really we're facing a hard challenge these days regarding families. The secular point of view wants so much to redefine families, deconstruct that, and the pressure is also here in the Indonesian society, and we're very much concerned about that. And I think I have written also in the commentary in the survey of this program that sometimes like Dr. Baku sometimes often goes to the parliament and talk, because there'll be a push for renewing our laws regarding families and things. So it's tough that they're facing this kind of pressure, Professor. but once we come up with the construct of family relation, for example, then the application and research would demand that they have to become very operationalized, and plan itself for observation, the way we do observation in the science that we learn in all this time until today. And how much would the Maqasid approach lend itself for that? Because at one point, once we do this kind of observation, then what we find is that we're reducing. A lot of reduction is done in that, and because you already mentioned also the human with the complexity and everything will be so much reduced, and that's, I think you know what I mean. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair, Prof. Emi. Actually, yeah, it's very true that observation will continue to be observation. But what are we observing? You're observing a family, okay, according to what definition do you define the family? That is when the concepts and the objectives and universal laws come in the story here. How do you define family? Any two things living together becomes a family, or does it have a definition in Islam? How are we created? Are we created male and female, as Allah said, subhanahu wa ta'ala, or are we created in 25 different kinds of, according to people's sins, they define their identities according to their sins. But in Islam, sins are not identities. Sins are sins. However colorful they are all sins. So, and humanity is defined according to male and female, and the offspring of the male and female. So when you define the family, yes, observation is observation. And we go down and we observe the families. But the way you look at family is a framework. And that is the importance of the framework. You go and observe the society, but how do you define the society? And what are the different stratas of the society? Are these economic stratas? Are these stratas of just means of violence? Or are you define the stratas based on the corruptors versus the reformers? And the reformers are high and the corruptors are low. And if you define the society this way, then you look at them from a different framework. Hence the importance of the framework. So I totally agree with you. You're not going to do away with everything in the sciences, but the basic concepts and the basic theories will have to be reconstructed in that sense. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
Allah bless you. Allah bless you.
Barakallah fiki, Professor Amy. Dr. Mahmoudal.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Prof. Auda and Dr. Jaida, I met you in 2018, 3 years back, exactly April. This time in Malaysia, we have an event on Maqasid Institute, Malaysia. Okay.
Yeah, I remember.
Again, after 3 years. So
Still
I understand that. Can you hear me properly?
Still in Malaysia?
Still Malaysia here, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Please go.
Okay. I understand the overall concept and everything is a movement. In one word, it's a new movement and it's a radical change on overall system, the conventional Islamic system and also the conventional academic system. So whenever we go to change the systems or make a radical change, and even what we are talking is not just reshaping what the conventional Islamic finance or economics or our scholars are doing. They just reshape it just with the name of Sharia, and everything is same. Even the same model, same tools, everything just converting as the name of Islamic tools. But it's not actually the Islamic. That in my class, I said our Muslims are not the halal Muslim. Huh? That's the problem. Even if I talk that we are going to Islamize everything in the halal way, proper Islamic model with the partnership, nobody will agree actually, because we are not halal Muslim. Eh? We cannot trust our brothers. And even if we go, okay, Islamic banking is still a partnership model, go in the partnership model, will you like to put your deposit and we'll take the loss? They said, no. Okay, I'll accept it because we are Muslim, we accept the loss, but next year I'll not put any more in this bank. Okay, so this is our mentality. So in that cases, the whole ummah is in another direction. So whenever we fight with this issue, there are lots of challenge. I think the challenge from three dimensions. One is from our conventional ulama approach. Our ulama and our fiqh scholars, even we are not tolerate other fiqhs. And in our country, I'm from Bangladesh, in our country, the peoples don't even tolerate others to rafedain and say amin loudly or silently. And they kill each other only for this issue. So they are in a sort of big jahiliyyah. And they never thought other schools and never accept others very small silly issues. But even if anybody don't pray, no problem with them. Only problem if you come in the masjid and you loudly say amin. So that's the problem in our ulama approach. And another, our scholarly approach, our scholars are also mindset of impact in one area. Suppose I'm Salafi, I cannot read the others. Even they talk something good or something beneficial, we said, okay, what is the name, who is from, he's from which school, okay, forget this. And even the scholars are nowadays clearly mentioned that don't go for this is a scholar by name, because they are from the other schools or other thoughts. Even nowadays, even if we see some scholars, some Modena scholars studied from Modena and now from in the Western world, they said, okay, don't take knowledge from them. It's a very direct approach. Okay, they said, suppose the Yasir Qadi, he gave the some fiqh. They said he's divine. Don't take his knowledge. And so this is the approach. And our ulama from the Salafi school I'm talking, the ulama are from even the Malaysian. The ulama is standing here in these regions or in the Middle East, they are in a good environment, different environment, completely different than the ulamas are in the Western side. So their fiqh is different. But the comfort zone ulamas, or we say the scholars in our these regions, they are not tolerating others. Even their students, they said they go divine, don't take knowledge from them. So this is a very top level, and not I'm talking about the mass people, so is the intellectual level. And their approach, the scientifically we said it is a dogmatic approach. They say everything dogmatically given and accepted rather than any question or scientific approach. So when we hit them, this is the first thing. Even we see all the prophets, when they come with new concept, new idea, the first peoples oppose them is the priest or the religious group. And even if we talk anything Islamic, something new, that's the first enemy or the first people will protest the Islamic group, our ulama. That's the big problem. So how we challenge this, we deal our ulama issue. Okay, this is the challenge from the ulama perspective. Okay, and another perspective is our brothers, those who are here, most of them are PhD students or doing PhD, or even our scholars, the teachers that you have mentioned, that we are involved in universities, we are under a conventional system or secular system. This academic system is no more in favor of Islam. Even we cannot talk anything related to the Islamic issue. Even in any article, any journals, we bring any reference from any religious issue, they instantly reject it, text rejection. And our universities, we are now fighting not for the knowledge creation. It's very true. Whole of the academia is no more in the knowledge creations. We are far away from our integrity. We are now looking for the ranking, looking for our number, how big my CV, how can I increase ranking, how can I go up in the ranking, what the production we made, it doesn't matter. We are no more in that integrity in whole academia, at least in these Asian regions or Middle East regions. I'm not talking the Western. Those who are the good school, Oxford, Harvard, or MIT, Cornell, they're fine. They are still with their integrity. But these Asian regions, we are trying to beat them with the ranking, and we are trying to go for the number. And when we go this, we just not focusing on knowledge. So in that case, we are our students are also more publication oriented. They are not about knowledge orientation. So this is the approach.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Mahmoud, mashallah. Very, very condensed.
And just 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute. I understand. I'm taking lots of time.
Okay.
Just 1 more minute. So, and another issue is ourselves, those who are talking about the Maqasid approach in new movement. Suppose I want to publish something, but my background, my knowledge is not in line with this. Another brother want to publish something on the name of new Maqasid framework here. And then what will happen at the end of the day, there is some chaos will be created, and the anti groups, other groups, they said, okay, you are not in the same approach and you are not aligned, and you are talking within different dimensions. What we are thinking in generally that we go in competitions and irrationally it will be corrected. I do some mistake and my colleagues will do the correction, so we will be in the upgraded. But actually, real life, the other people, the opponents will oppose it so much, so we cannot go in the right direction. Even I'm not telling that I'll be right directions or he'll be the right direction. Even because this is the new approach, we are still not getting any matured framework or whatever the acceptable framework. Even the framework is not even acceptable in our all school of thoughts or even academia. So whenever we go in this approach and without any control, that will make a big problem. And the last one, and another issue, you mentioned the some framework leadership. We should have leadership that will control everything. And we aligned with the institutions. Maybe we aligned with the Waqf institutions or Islamic microfinance institution or Islamic banks. So we can utilize our framework with them for our studies and make a relationship like the university in South Africa mentioned. So if we introduce these frameworks and align with them, then we get very quick feedback, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your questions.
Allah yakrimak. Barakallah feek, Dr. Mahmoud. I really agree with you. I agree with you. But I don't think that the situation is that bad. I think that many of the scholars have problems. I differentiate between two types of scholars, the sincere scholars and the scholars of the dunya. People kind of taking scholarship as a career, as a way to advance their own selfish needs, versus sincere scholars. Sincere scholars, from what I dealt with around the world, if they are sincere, even if they differ with you and they think that you are opening the door for things that could be dangerous or whatever, they will not fight against you. They will not conspire against you. But the insincere scholars, which is also a good portion, let's say, is quite a substantial portion of scholars who are not sincere, are not really people who want to serve the ummah, they will attack you, and they will even conspire with tyrannical governments against you. You have a lot of this in Bangladesh and so forth. Yeah. So, but my point is, akhi, scholarship as it is today, because of the lack of renewal or the low level of renewal, is rendering itself irrelevant. So unfortunately, lots of our Islamic scholars are becoming irrelevant to the usual Muslim, the usual good Muslim, because they are not really helping with their situation. And I think there is a lot of room for this methodology. Jazakallah khair, you're concerned about it, you want to promote it. There is a lot of room in the professional circles of Muslims, not necessarily in the ulama circles. Even though I have a number of students from all sorts of traditional universities, and they change. They might not agree with me on everything, but this is a minority. The majority of the people who will receive these ideas and are willing to renew Islam are people outside these circles. They don't live in that planet of, Deoband or like whatever. I gave some lectures there. I had a lot of trouble with some of the scholars. They don't live in that planet and in that century. They live in today's century on today's planet. And this is a lot of Muslims. They are not necessarily mosque goers. They pray Friday because they are God-fearing Muslims, but they are not the usual mosque crowd. And I think there is a lot of room for these new ideas with that bracket of the ummah that is a silent bracket so far. In terms of secular education and so on, I tried to answer this yesterday. It's quite a challenging question. When you are part of a university that does not accept you bringing normative arguments to the classroom, it's always complex. You could have parallel scholarships, parallel lines of your scholarship. Perhaps at some point in your career, you will have to make some choices between the Islamic scholarship or the secular scholarship. But speaking with you about my experience, earlier in my life, 20 years ago, I was doing some parallel scholarship, so teaching technical kind of philosophy here, versus my scholarship that I'm reading and writing in a different institution. And you could have these parallel lives when you are younger and you have energy and so forth. And perhaps when you get older, you will have to make some choices. What exactly do you want to do? So that's to answer your question, inshallah, quickly. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah fi.
Barakallah fikum. Okay. I have in order Sayyid Jamaluddin, Ardi, and Matthew. I hope you can, inshallah, all of you be concise. And Brother Sayyid, tafaddal.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Azam. Professor Auda, I just have a very brief question. This is more strategic question because I live in West. I don't live in a Muslim country. And you know, the word Islamization in West has been used as a way to attack Muslims. Like we're coming to West to Islamicize. We're coming to West to take over. But I love the word Islamization. I want to use it. But this is the problem for me in Sweden, in a very secularized country, that this is something that they always try to use against us as something where we're infiltrating, like how they spoke about the Jews 100 years ago. So what is your suggestion, Professor Auda? Because we believe that Islamization is something beautiful. What can we do? You live in Canada, so I can imagine you have been through this as well. Jazakallah khairan.
Well, as a Canadian, I don't see myself alien to the society. I'm not sure if this is only a Canadian thing or if you can do that in Sweden. It's more.
It is different in Sweden, Professor, to tell you the truth. Much different.
I don't see myself alien to the society. I am Muslim. I don't hide it. Do I love for Islam to impact Canada? Yes, and I call for that. And you know, I think part of the solution, and we're going to have Dr. Yahya, Dr. Baptist speaking after me, as an example of a European who doesn't believe that he is different from Europe, or perhaps he could change this perception when he speaks, inshallah. You know, as citizens of the West, we have to practice our citizenship. And we are part of the West. And Islam is part of the West from the 1st century Hijri, when it came to Southern Europe. Islam is part of that. And so many princes of Europe converted to Islam. Yes, they try to omit them from history. And so many Europeans are Muslims. And Islam was in America hundreds of years before Columbus. And yes, history omitted a lot of that. But Islam is part of the Western story. And the problem is that Western Muslims sometimes think that they are different because of the politics. But we should bring a discourse that is part of the society. Islam is for everybody. When I'm good to my neighbors here, I'm part of the society. I'm Muslim. I'm not apologetic about it. But I think this schism, and yes, they could be scared from the word Islamize, because we're not trying to Islamize, we're trying to bring good, al-khair, you know, exactly. Good. And that good includes believing in God. I think, I'm not sure. I think it's a dilemma of people who are immigrants. I was like that 30 years ago when I immigrated to the West. And I felt I am an Arab guy in Canada. Now I don't feel like that. I feel the Arab world is alien to me. And to me, Canada is more Islamic than Arabia, where I come from, or Egypt, where I grew up. Of course, it's more Islamic than Arabia. Because what is Islamic in Arabia now? Of course, other than the Mecca and Medina. No, I mean, so it depends on how we define Islamic and how we develop into being a part of the society. Ya qawmi, my people, you see. Yeah. Allahu a'lam. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, for the sake of time, inshallah, we'll limit the participation to Brother Dr. Ardi, Matthew, and Professor Fawzan, and then we'll move on to our next session, inshallah ta'ala. Brother Ardi.
Thank you, Dr. Raza. I'm not a doctor. I'm just coming from the practical side. So, Professor Auda, Dr. Azab. Let me share first a personal story. So I'm a mu'alaf. So I converted to Islam quite a long time ago. I feel lucky that I converted to Islam because of, from my point of view, is after I read a small book about Tawhid. So I consider myself converting to Islam because of the Tawhid point of view of Islam. I feel this is a very condensed and integrated and makes sense for me. But afterward, there are some times that I, what do you call that, challenge my belief or maybe questioning my belief, because surrounding is I don't know what you call it. It's more of fiqh oriented things, and then it's more like halal and haram things, you know. So, but luckily, Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala still keep me in Islam, and luckily also I found this methodology. I found this perspective that after I listening to you, Professor Auda, I found that this is the kind of Islam that that I fall in love to. Let's just put it that way. It's that before I think that I am a Muslim, but I'm not a mainstream Muslim. Before that's the way I see it. But now after I listen to you, I feel that my perspective of Islam is mainstream, but the others is not. So that's basically the understanding that I have. So first, could you comment on that, Professor Auda? Is it the right way to see it? Is it that after I hear about what happened to Islam and everything and how you develop the methodology, I feel that this is basically what Islam is, and what happened or what the majority belief or perspective is not the mainstream, if I may say that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that as mentioned before, that I'm on the practical area, so I'm not academics. So from the three circle that you share, I mostly interest in the action circle, right? So I'm in business or management perspective, we are what do you call that? We are get used to understand about what we want to achieve or what impact we want to get from our organizations. And from the 4 days that I attend this sessions, I still don't get what the Maqasid Institutes want to achieve, what the impact you want to get. And if the impact and the achievement that you want to get is, I remember you mentioned only the research, right? But if the impact that you want to get is only on the research, then the question is that any other institutions, is that any other people or team that concerned about the actions? Because we could have this what do you call that, beautiful framework going around the academics for years and years, for another 10 years or 20 years, but we haven't seen changes in Ummah. So I feel that I strongly feel that the action part is also the important part, if maybe the most important one, if we would like to put that way. So could you share your point of view on that? Because I really I strongly believe that we need to put the changing in the Ummah is the #1 priority. Although you mentioned that you strategizing things like that, I still don't hear that in terms of the Ummah perspective.
Thank you, Brother Adi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akhi. Thank you so much. Very interesting to comment on your first question. You are right. You are mainstream because Tawheed is mainstream. And when you say that you came to Islam because of Tawheed, this is the truth. But the mainstream Islam is not necessarily majority. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the majority of humanity will never believe in you, Muhammad. And the majority of believers will associate other gods with God. Allah said in the Quran. So the majority are not the holders of the truth. They could settle an election for a political thing. That is fine. But the majority is not the holder of the truth. The truth is always going to be a minority exercise and a minority possession. But that is, you're right, that is how we define mainstream. Because if you mean by mainstream truth, then inshallah you are on the truth. You believe in Tawheed, you believe in the higher ideals of Islam. And so many Muslims are going astray, even if they call themselves Muslims. So you are right on this, and I totally agree. And I also consider myself to be a minority, but also mainstream, because I go back to the Quran and Sunnah. What more authentic can I be if I don't go to the Quran and Sunnah? Your second question is actually, inshallah, part of what we're trying to do too. In our strategic objectives as Maqasid Institute, we said that 2021 will be the time of forming the Maqasid Research Network, MRN. And then we had an idea a few years ago, we're going to bring back in 2022, which we call the Maqasid Action Network. In the Maqasid Action Network, our plan is to translate the research into action. So a research about racism, how can this change the ground on racism? A research about family, how can this impact families and so on? So our plan, and please email us and join our efforts if you would like to, in the Maqasid Action Network, which is networking different organizations that work for the same objectives. And that is part of our plan too, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah fiik. Honor to meet you.
Barakallah fiik. طيب. I would like to take permission, inshallah, from those who have raised hands, that I delay them to the end, inshallah, to our closing session. I have them in priority, Brother Matthew and Professor Fawzan, inshallah ta'ala, just for the sake of time. We have with us Dr. Baptiste Yahya Bourdard. He's the manager of research, and he's a research associate at Maqasid. He's also an assistant professor at IPSA. I would like to offer him the floor right now to tell us about the long-awaited session of how to be involved in the research network, and what's next for us, and how can we put all that we have gathered and internalized over the past few weeks, inshallah, into action and moving forward through the research network. So again, forgive me, Brother Matthew and Professor Fawzan, but I will inshallah give you priority in the closing session as we close. But without further ado, Dr. Baptiste, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Barakallahu fiik, jazakallah khair, dear brother. Nice to meet you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here for you, with you. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to listen to the first part of the session as I was outside and traveling now, and somehow it's difficult to find but space to connect to a proper internet connection. But alhamdulillah, I'm very happy to be here. And today I would like to speak with you, not to deliver a course or talk or formal stuff, but rather to speak from my heart, to speak from my own perspective, and to try to bring some outputs linked to the needs we have to try to implement Maqasid methodology in our lives and in our projects too. First of all, I would like to give a very short introduction. As I said, there's nothing formal here. I would love to have some questions, to talk with you, to interact in a more free way. But just to begin, I think that now in the world, Islam is mostly everywhere. I'm currently in Mexico. I was in Colombia for the last weeks, and I'm here to study Islamic organizations, Da'wah in Latin America. And even here, in this part of the world, we can find mosques, we can find people talking about Islam, alhamdulillah. So the reference to Islam is everywhere. However, a lot of people embrace Islam here, but they leave Islam. They convert, but a few months later, few years later, they don't like it. They don't want to listen to, they don't want to hear about Islam anymore because they got disappointed. And what I try to explain to them, to these people, is that what they got as an Islamic experience is not so much Islam, is more derived way to understand Islam, very superficial way. So the thing is, the fact is that they think they hate Islam. They think, oh, what we knew about Islam is not good for humanity, is not good for ourselves. But actually it's not Islam, it was a wrong way to understand it. And a lot of organizations, when we want to spread Islam around the world to make da'wah, we may be very careful not to show a bad picture of Islam. And for this introduction, I think that today we talk about a lot about Islamic identity. We want to show things, we want to express, to talk about Islam in a loud way, but sometimes we lack understanding of what Islam really teaches us to do and how it teaches us to live. I remember a few years ago, there was a khutbah in France from a sheikh called Islam ibn Ahmed. And he said he wanted to ask two questions to the Muslims in the mosque. He said, you just have two questions to ask. The first question was, what Islam makes to change your whole life? How you manage to change your life, to improve your life, to improve the way you live in line with Islam. How Islam impacts your life then? The second question is how you impact society because of your faith. As a Muslim, how Islam helps you to impact society in a more positive way. And he said that when we ask these questions, many of us, including me, unfortunately, sometimes we fail to respond. We may say, oh, with Islam, I didn't change the way I wanted, and I didn't impact the society the way I was expected to. So I think these questions are fundamental and justify a new reflection of the way we think about Islam and the way we practice and the way we implement Islamic guidelines in societies. For this, the Maqasid methodology is at the heart, it's at the core of this reflection, because the Maqasid gives a very important place to the objectives, as Maqasid said. And I think that when we forget the objectives, we may we may lose the path. And remembering the objectives, trying to extract the objective, the maqasid from the Quran and Sunnah is fundamental, especially at that time, to rethink about Islam and to extract some solutions for ourselves, for our families, for our societies, and for the world. And then I think that this work, strangely enough, it hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been done in many parts of the Muslim world. Or I wouldn't, as Sheikh Jasser said before, I wouldn't make a separation between Europe and Muslim and Western world and Muslim world, because I think that Islam is for the whole people, the whole world. And today we have Muslim presence in any country. And I think that this dichotomy between Muslim societies and non-Muslim societies is being compromised by the evolution of history now. But both in Muslim majority societies and Muslim minority countries, we face the same issues, and often we face kind of religious schizophrenia, which we try to live Islam in one way, but the other way we face contradictions based on the society we live in. And this situation forces us to rethink about how Islam can give the guidelines, can give us the guidance to live according the Quranic revelation and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is one thing. Sheikh Jasser Auda and other scholars emphasize the fact that the Quran and the Sunnah have to be read and understood, and that they can impact the society. So the main word here is how to lead to social change. But I would like a specific point from my side. As I'm not a Muslim scholar, I'm not grounded in Islamic tradition. My approach is more about assessing reality, is more about understanding what are the social issues today, what are the needs, and how Muslims live. So I don't know if I make myself clear, but there is two ways to approach the issue we have as Muslims today in the world. There's the first way is to deal with the text, to deal with the revelation, Quran, Sunnah, and to extract some guidelines based on the religious texts. Another, at the opposite, there is another way to start is to understand reality, to assess what's going on in societies. And that's where I'm coming from. But the issue now, the challenge would be to bridge both of the approach, because Maqasid methodology is built and it's made to make them together. One cannot skip the way of assessing reality. If we don't assess reality, we may understand Quran and fiqh and Sunnah in a very good way, but we may fail to impact society, because to impact society, it's not enough to understand what Islamic guidelines are, but it's also important to understand people's problems, people's issues, and to draft some strategies to impact the world and strategies to make people evolve. Because, for instance, when an organization, Muslim organizations, goes to make da'wah in a remote country where there is no Islamic presence, for instance, they may teach what Islam say, and they may say, this is haram, this is halal, you have to do this is not good, you should avoid this. But this is not enough, because they have to understand the culture, they have to understand societies, and they have to communicate and to be able to educate people. If not, it will fail, because people will just find that it's too heavy for them. And Quran and Sunnah, as Sheikh Jasser explained in his books, was revealed in stages as well, in order to educate people. So sometimes in today's world, some Islamic organizations forget this point, and when they try to bring Islamic guidelines in the world, in the society, they fail because the people just can't follow that, which is a contradiction, because we believe that Islam is a rahmah lil alamin, it's for everybody, it's for the whole world. But when we see here what's going on, for instance, where I'm now in Mexico, in Colombia, there is a big contradiction, because Muslims come and they try to bring Islam, and then the people get rid of this, they get away from the religious guidelines because they find it's too difficult. But the fact that they find it too difficult may make question us, is it the real approach of Islam to deliver da'wah, or to try to make some social projects inspired by Islamic guidelines? Is it the correct way? If people just go the way, for me, it means that there is a problem, because human beings are sacred. They come from the fitra, and we cannot make Islam as a very elitist group, just for the small elite which would be just above the mass. I think that's not the correct, the proper way to implement Islam. I'm very sorry, because I talk a lot about this. It is not the main objective of my talk here, but I think it was a useful introduction. I hope to try to see what we can do as people, as researchers, all together, to think about how Islam can change ourselves and change society. Because the main key word here is how to drive to social change. And for this, I'm very happy to meet you now. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to connect the last session groups. So what I understand, the way we deal with the projects now is that the main idea is to build some research groups. These research groups could be made, they could be made up on specializations areas, but also on geographical and language spheres. So for instance, people speak Arabic, other people speak English or other language maybe. This is a way to build groups, but I think that the most important thing is to build groups based on objectives, namely on specializations, on areas. So the first challenge here would be to define the main topics we would like to work on together and to form some groups. And based on the groups we form, for instance, we can have poverty alleviation or zakat management or something like this, and we can combine people working on that and sharing some knowledge, sharing some experience, and trying to understand how the Maqasid methodology applies to this specific issue. Here again, there is the main issue, the main challenge will be to combine the both guidelines we have, the first guidelines from the Quran and Sunnah, but then to assess reality in order to make sure that both understanding allows to draft a strategy which will finally lead to social change. That's the main priority we want to implement here. And the challenge also is to unify so different people within the same groups, because people may come from various backgrounds, various countries, various curriculum, but we have to work together and to make sure that each of us bring something which nourish the whole understanding that what we want to do with this group dynamics, inshallah, within the next weeks and month. But I will be very happy if you have more specific questions or doubts or ideas to share here. So I don't know if there is time to have a more interactive way. Or
yes, Doctor. I can give you a co-host ability right now, and you can share for sure. You should be good to go now.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Yahya. So just to summarize and push forward your next step of presentation, my brothers and sisters, Dr. Yahya Brodar or Baptiste Brodar is our manager of the research project of Maqasid Institute. And therefore, he will be receiving your input that you fill out in the exit kind of statements that you write. You will have, inshallah, a questionnaire that you will fill out. All the questionnaires will go to Dr. Yahya, and Dr. Yahya will divide you into groups, and he will be in communication with you as leaders of groups, as individual researchers. And as he mentioned, we could divide the groups into languages. For example, a number of Urdu-speaking brothers and sisters would like to form a research group, or geography. The research group from India, we were told of, from Ethiopia, etc. Or a research group in terms of disciplines or phenomena. So the psychologists speak together, people who are concerned about poverty or zakah or waqf together, and so on. So in the questionnaire, please fill out these details and expect that Dr. Yahya will contact with you. So please continue, Dr. Yahya. I'm just summarizing what he said. Jazakallah khair.
Amin wa iyyakum. Barakallahu fik. Thank you, Sheikh. Thank you, Sheikh Auda.
He's one of my favorite brothers. He's a Swiss brother, but every time I call him, he replies from a different country. So Colombia, now Mexico, and he should be teaching the next course also in South Africa, in the National Peace College, an assistant professor there. So he'll be teaching us a course on social or movements and Islamic organizations for those who would like to register as well after Dr. Zaid's course. MashaAllah. Please go ahead, Dr.
Yeah, Barakallahu fikum. Inshallah, the course in IPSA College in South Africa, in Cape Town, will start on 17th of May, just after Ramadan, inshallah. 1 week after Eid, inshallah. So you are all welcome to join, of course. It will be a bit different, but you are all welcome to participate. As Dr. Jasser explained now, that's the main step we have to do now, is to build some groups, which is challenging, but also we don't want that to be too formal, because that's a process which will elaborate in itself by practice. As a lot of things we do, we take them as it comes. We cannot just design whole projects very rigidly, because it doesn't work like that. So we prefer to get your inputs first. I will carefully read the response of the questionnaire and to try to form some groups according to the area. Some people are specialized in usul, others are specialized, as Dr. Jasser gave some examples, in poverty alleviation, psychology, economy, governance, and a lot of topics. We don't want to have a reduced list of topics, because I think that, of course, Islam applies to every aspect of human life. So according to the profile, to the backgrounds of people we have here, according to your profiles, we may identify some work groups. And at the same time, I don't want to be too rigid. So if somebody thinks that it doesn't belong in the proper group and he wants to work in another group with other people, you are free. You're also free to contact me and to ask and to speak with me about that, and to speak with the other people managing this project here. So it's very important to keep in mind that it's collaborating, and it's a collaborating project, and that we all do that together for the sake of Allah, and we try to achieve the best results, inshallah, in terms of strategies. For instance, you may have someone who is a psychologist, but they think that he may work in poverty alleviation or other topic based on his specialization of psychology, for instance. So we don't want that to be too formal, because the fields are also human invention. If we refer to the old scholars of Islam, fuqaha, as also Dr. Jasser talked about that in his books about Maqasid, the fuqaha of before used to have some skills in various fields, and they didn't divide as we do today. But because of the way that university was developed within the last decades, within the last century, mostly in Western countries, we have this classification between economy, humanities, social work, sociology, psychology, and so on, which often are not accurate to deal with the current issues, because we are forced to develop transfield or cross-field approach to deal effectively with the problems. As for myself, I'm mostly specialized in social work, and we cannot just take the social aspect of the individual in one side and psychological aspect in other way, and just to divide that is not natural. But unfortunately, it's that a lot of people do today, especially in the academia. So we would like to be more in depth and to go beyond these wrong, I think we can say wrong, disciplinary boundaries, because we have to make sure that we are able, based on the Islamic guidelines, to tackle the issues in a more effective way. And for this, the groups, I'm very eager to read about your questions, to read about your comments, your inputs, and to try to form the groups which are more accurate in terms of trying to see who can do what who is willing to work in which aspect. But I'll be very happy to respond to questions now if you have some questions or specific outputs to give or whatever.
بارك الله فيكم Dr. Yahya, جزاك الله خيرا. I would like to highlight Dr. Zaid's comment that inshallah Dr. Baptiste will be fully on board as the manager of research starting July. So this is the timeline that we are working with, and please be patient as the team works to develop the proper research, groups and ecosystems. We're in April now, and I guess we'll start with that, Dr. Yahya, and then I'm going to give the opportunity to Brother Matthew and Professor Fawzan. Is this the timeline that we should be expecting to work with? July as the initiation of these research groups formally.
Yes, thank you, Brother Azam. Thanks a lot to specify that. That's true that till July I'll be very busy with a lot of other duties. So the process will begin now. The process has already begun, but we should be patient about that time, inshallah. And after July, we can work more consistently. But I think that from there, we can start to reflect on this. And it's very important to try all together to be proactive, as we say, because you may have very interesting ideas that we don't have. You may contribute and bring your suggestions. This is very important too, especially with this work which is very wide in terms of areas, in terms of fields we want to cover. So according to the profiles, to the propositions, we can build the proper groups, and this reflection may be led by every one of us. That's the idea, that everyone contributes, everyone makes suggestions about what we can do, and inshallah, we will begin that as soon as possible.
Barakallah fikum, Dr. Yahya, and Jazakallahu khairan. I'd like to remind everyone that Microsoft Teams is available, and we can jump on it right now. We don't have to wait till July to connect with each other and to cross paths there and to initiate these discussions and these brainstorming sessions there. If you have technical difficulties on joining MS Teams, you can contact Dr. Ildus, inshallah ta'ala. And as we go right now, moving forward with the discussion period, I sent the link for the participation survey today. If you can please fill it and participate with the questions simultaneously. Right now, I'd like to give the floor to my brother Matthew, who had his hand up, and then followed by Professor Fawzan, inshallah, from the last session. Brother Matthew, we can see you speak. I think we hear you better now. Not yet.
You're on mute.
I don't think it's on mute, Matthew, but I think there may be a problem with the microphone in your device. It's very fade.
I have something on the speaker.
Well, how about Matthew? You can, inshallah, do some troubleshooting if you don't mind. I'll just move forward for the sake of time to Professor Fawzan. So Professor Fawzan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Azam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I want to give a comment on Islamization knowledge and Maqasid. From my opinion, Maqasid Sharia or Maqasid approach is part of the Islamization of knowledge. In fact, when your comment, Prof. Jasser said that Islamization of knowledge just emphasized on social science, I think this is a matter of priority. During those days where we have like Prof. Jamal Zanji, the father of Dr. Zaid, they are engineers, and Dr. Tonji, Dr. Ahmad, Dr. Isha are from engineers, but maybe Dr. Hamid Abu Sulaiman is more on the social science. That's why they start with social science, because they see the ummah need to be tackled from social science aspect for political science, sociology, and so on. But now, like for example, this book is ICT and Islam. It's a natural science, it's computer science. We also touch on Islamization knowledge, and I look at Maqasid is the expansion of Islamization knowledge. Even in my chapter, we discuss on Maqasid Sharia. And in fact, in our universities, Maqasid Sharia has become one of the vision or mission of the universities now, because we extend from Islamization to Maqasid Sharia. And last year alone, we provide research grant for applied Maqasid. So we name it applied Maqasid, no longer theoretical, but applied Maqasid. So looking at the expansion and continuation, as you said, that when we wrote the book, it's like our baby, is a grow up from the kindergarten to primary school to high school, now even university. So it's grow up. So I look at this as part of the process, and it's a complement each other. In fact, we can work together, and this is the beautiful of the ummah. In fact, Prof. Kamal Hassan tried to put like Brother Said Jamaluddin worried about the Islamization, the term Islamization, so he named it Islamicization, Islamites, to Islamic. It's not to make it someone Islam, but to Islamize it. So this is a matter of terminology, but we in the right direction. I think we inshallah we can grow together, and I see the light in the end of the tunnel. Thank you very much.
Jazakumullah khair. If I may comment, Dr. Azam, Jazakumullah khair, Prof. Fauzan. And alhamdulillah, of course, the International Islamic University of Malaysia is a natural partner for us, and we found in Prof. Fauzan a natural partner in the Maqasid Research Network technology. We're trying to build a platform for everybody here of software that could help you with your research. Inshallah, you'll hear about it when we start the research cycle in July. With Prof. Fauzan, we're trying to build a database of the concepts and objectives and groups and all of that from the Quran and Sunnah. We're building it on the IIUM platform. And inshallah, all of you will be on that platform as part of the electronic library that we built, library of books, as well as library of concepts and applications. So alhamdulillah, the partnership is continuing. And of course, there's a lot of complementary efforts, alhamdulillah. For Dr. Yahya, I want to go back to the point of filling out the questionnaire and asking Dr. Yahya to divide our groups. And by the way, you can speak to Dr. Yahya in Arabic. I received a comment that some of you would prefer Arabic over English. His Arabic is, I think, better than his English. And he also speaks, by the way, German and Spanish and Portuguese and Turkish, right? So, mashallah, yani, speak to him in any language, he will reply, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Barakallah fikum. Barakallah fikum, Professor and Dr. Yahya. I also would like to summarize, I think, from what I have gathered, Dr. Yahya, if you allow me. So right now, we have finished mashallah, the methodology, we have internalized it. It's a very dense document. It's a very dense a paradigm that we want to take our time to go back to it, re-explore it. We have the recordings that will be shared via Microsoft Teams, as well as by email tonight, inshallah ta'ala. So all of that from right now to July, we have the opportunity to revisit, re-explore. We will also have a session, inshallah, dedicated for anyone who would like to present for 10 or 15 minutes about what the research interests and how they will plan to apply the methodology. So that will be a session dedicated. It will be scheduled after Ramadan, I believe. Right now, we can suggest and we can start brainstorming with Dr. Yahya and everyone else of what research teams look like. What are the research teams that you prefer to join, that you are interested in, which niches you want to explore, and inshallah we can start even individually practicing and using the methodology, perhaps reach out individually or as a group on the Microsoft Teams for for questions that come up as you apply the methodology, reach out to Dr. Jasser and so on. The questionnaire is extremely important, as Professor Jasser mentioned. It will be a questionnaire that is different from the survey that I sent today. This will be at the end of the day, that talk about the whole program in general, and that your feedback is given to Maqasid Institute. Sorry, Professor Jasser, I saw that you wanted to speak.
No, I just wanted Dr. Yahya to elaborate more on the questionnaire, and if you have it, perhaps put it up as you wish. I'm not sure, but as the process goes. So today we will email everybody with the questionnaire. Please, Dr. Yahya.
Yes, inshallah, today the link will be sent, inshallah, and you are invited to fill out the questionnaire. The questions are there, but what I want to emphasize here is that you're welcome to add some comments. It's very important, not just to fill the questions, but also you are free to complete and to share your own expectations, your own area of interest, and what we want to achieve, because it's very important. Beyond the sole questionnaire. And also, besides, I'm also willing to be available to respond to questions, so feel free to email me. Inshallah, I can share my emails of Maqasid Institute, and we want that to be interactive, not just filling questionnaire and to deal with data in a quantitative way. It's not enough. We want to hear from you, your suggestions, and we can even it was told that I wouldn't be able to be very active till July, but at the same time I'm keep in touch. I'm available for any questions, for any interaction we can have, or if you have suggestions, I will be very happy to read them as well. So please, let's do that all together, and you will have news soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Barakallah fikum, Dr. Yahya. I think that's a great, mashallah, an overview of the way forward. You weren't here over the past few days, Dr. Yahya. Everyone was super zealous to explore how do we move forward, how do we take this methodology and apply it and bring it to life in our fields and in our disciplines. Speaking for myself as well. So inshallah, right now we understand that inshallah we will carry on this endeavor on Microsoft Teams, where we engage and brainstorm more, and we can suggest and contribute to the formation of these research groups as they form. We can start experimenting with the methodology. We can ask questions. We can raise points. We can go back and forth together there, and inshallah ta'ala, as the summer kicks in July, we hope that all these research groups can initiate, inshallah ta'ala, at once. Does anyone have any questions? Do you have any unanswered point that you'd like to raise?
Yeah, I apologize for not being able to follow up. So if there is any point, please, any comment, any final corrections, whatever you want, inshallah. I haven't followed the chat properly. Please go ahead.
Prof. Jasser, I think I agree with you that we need to translate your book in this region, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Southern Thailand, Singapore. In fact, we are speaking the same language. And for your information, we are sponsoring the translation of your book on Maqasid Sharia into our language, Bahasa Melayu. Thank you.
More than happy.
Alhamdulillah, inshallah, our official translator of Sheikh Jasser is right there, Marwan Bukhari, inshallah. who just finished his master's degree, and he's a wonderful Maqasid scholar, mashallah. I think we'll be very, very happy. And we are actually sending the Arabic version of the book, inshallah. We are mailing it to Malaysia, bi'awni ta'ala, this week. So we're sending a few copies of the Arabic book to Malaysia. So he'll have it, inshallah. And we're very keen to translate it, bi'awnihi ta'ala.
Barakallah fiik. Brother Farid, sorry, can we all, inshallah, go back to the raise hand function, Dr. Farid, if you don't mind? Allah yajzik al-khair. I'm looking right now in order. There's Dr. Claire and Dr. Umnia, and Dr. Farid, if you would like, I can have you third. But please, Dr. Claire, you can go ahead, inshallah.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief this time. It's just a question about the school system, the organization, because it seemed to me that we talked about like the global North academia form of research and teaching, and we talked about Maqasid. But I wanted also, because coming from a French background, I'm still not quite sure what we do with the madrasa system, and how. I mean, if we could with Maqasid also reinvest that model. Yeah, so that's just a question of organization and model and the madrasa system.
Well, mashallah, I'll refer this question to Brother Baptiste, being French and being someone who did research on these issues particularly. Please, Dr. Yahya, please go ahead. French in the language sense. He's Swiss, I know, but please go ahead.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for the question. The Maqasid methodology is the first step that allows us to think about solutions to apply to any aspect. It's not including the madrasa system. It's the guidelines. The Maqasid approach, as you studied in the course with Sheikh Jasser, gave the basics, the fundamentals to be able to draft some solutions. But at the same time, as you are part of a context, you need to understand the context in a proper way, and you need to understand the challenges and the hardships you may face, and then to connect both. So that's why we need both people working in Usuli to be able to give the main guidelines in terms of religious texts, but also to understand your proper French context, the madrasa system or other systems. And for this, of course, the Maqasid methodology is supposed to apply and to give some solutions, but it will come with work from both parts. It will come from connected the fact that you understand the principle of the Maqasid methodology and the needs of the social context, and then to build a strategy to challenge that. So this question will be part of your work, of your group work, of your group research, and of course we can talk about that together. Myself, I lived in France quite a long time, so I'm very familiar with the French context. And this is a good example how Maqasid methodology could apply to reality. That's what we want to achieve. But I don't know, I don't have a lot of details in your questions, so we can talk more about that in depth, of course. But I don't know what you expect now to have as an answer without entering into the details either. Yeah.
MashaAllah. Yani, this is a perfect example to pursue this discussion on Teams, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Welcome. Okay, Dr. Umnia.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Jasser, for always inspiring me. Just like I mean, I've been listening a lot through the last days, and I just have an observation. I am Egyptian origin, but I'm also German. I've lived in many parts of the world, Indonesia, Vietnam, and like others. Currently, I'm in Qatar. And I basically see myself as a Muslim without defining my borders. And I do feel from our conversations over the past days that we are at different stages and we are sort of divided by region. And I was wondering that Dr. Jasser, with your background and with your knowledge and how you like look at things, you're very forward. If we cannot make the same mistakes of dividing one another by region and really looking more from like modern perspective on how we can produce things that are like relevant to our time today, so that the next generation doesn't blame us for what we're leaving. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Well, Jazakallah khair. This is a very important addition because the politics of today trained people to identify with their nation states. So the first thing that an Arab would say, I'm Sudanese, I'm Egyptian, I'm whatever it is, Saudi or any of these things. And this is not an identity. As Muslims, our identity is being believers. I could be part of a polity. I'm here part of Canada. That is the administration that I work through legally, but it is not supposed to be my core identity. So I agree with you not to have the regional divisions as our core identity. Yet, on the other hand, regional divisions are reality. People in Indonesia deal with a reality that's different from people in Thailand or people in China. And therefore, sometimes the reality tells us that let us try to deal with a region, not necessarily a nation state, because Russia is so huge, Canada is so huge. There is a difference between East and West here. America, different, even different cultures within America. So I would say that, yes, the regions are not our core identity, but I think they are still important, at least in the geography of our motion. When we are in South Africa, there is a context in South Africa and the revolution that happened and the change from apartheid. There is kind of a common history that wherever you are in South Africa, you are dealing with. And therefore, it is not wrong to say that we have a program in South Africa that focuses on the issues there. But we're not saying that it's only South African. It's global. And as you mentioned, most of us here that I know of lived in different countries and have different identities. And this is very important for humanity, because I think that humanity needs to change their biases and their little races and so on, and move towards a globalized world, not in the agenda of globalization necessarily, as in world corporations, but in the agenda of the true humanity. I think this is important.
So Dr. Jasser, thanks for your answer. And I will not take a lot of time, but just a thought. Now there is a trend, it's called globalization, and especially after COVID, right? We're seeing that the global world is becoming more local. So I think maybe we can use that approach, you know, when we think of like, what is the purpose and why are we here? So as a Muslim, it doesn't really matter where you are in which country, because your purpose is there, as you explained it to us. You know, we have one purpose. Let's use that as our global framework. And then we can look at things locally so that we don't lose the essence of Quran and Hadith, like what you have told us over the past days, by like making it more local. Yeah, like let's go away from the UN sort of approach of saying localizing everything. I think let's look at it more global and then local in a way, so we don't lose what you want to do.
I agree. I totally agree, inshallah. Inshallah.
Barakallah fiki, Dr. Amnia. Brother Farid, assalamu alaikum. Brother Farid, yeah, please go ahead, mashallah.
Dr. Jasser, my first encounter with some of your materials, books, were on systems thinking. So personally, I've been in the area of human resource development, more of a practitioner rather than an academician or from an education institute. So mine is a practitioner in the area of human resource development and also in organization development. So one of the things that I'm looking at is how far has Islamic, I think the system thinking is significant for me. It was kind of a breakthrough because the problems we face in organization is also systemic. And the idea of management thinking being more of an applied rather than just the pure studies by itself. So really, and then when I came to know about the Islamic movement worldwide and the system thinking, that we do have pockets of success here and there on Islamic organization worldwide, but holistically, the whole system, we don't seem to be doing that much of a breakthrough. So we do have, when I came to know the idea of system thinking, I did read some of the earlier books like from Quran Murad, who talks about Islamic movement system thinking. So, and then your book on the Maqasid Sharia system thinking. So it got me saying, how far do we have a really significant write-up on how to use Islamic management thinking towards contemporary organization, be it purely Islamic based or non-Islamic organization that aspire to use Islamic methodologies. So I just like to get your view. How far do you see the contribution or writings towards really significant Islamic management thinking that can be significantly helpful for organization? And I think that taking to reality that we do have systemic problems as well, because just like the earlier sister talked about this, now we're talking about local, being global yet local, from the word global and local. So we do have global thinking about Islamic management thinking, but we do have local realities that we're facing, which warrants organization to realize that leaders of organizations still have to work with the reality of their human resource, which may not have the level of Islamic thinking that we're talking about in universities or at higher levels. So we do have local realities, yet we do have global thinking that which we are trying to provide through our, through most of us being educated. So my directly is, how much have you seen from a system thinking that that in the management thinking that the Islamic ideas and or Islamic systemic thinking is already evident in the that's using so far. Wallahu a'lam.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. Yeah, I think that the approach to management from an Islamic point of view is at a stage very similar to the approach to other fields from an Islamic point of view, economics and psychology and so on. There are some very good breakthroughs, and there is a lot of apologism, but there is also a room for new ideas and so on, especially through the Maqasid lens. And the systems book I wrote about 20 years ago when I was doing research, using my background in systems, applying it on Maqasid. But I think the Maqasid methodology, as I introduce it now, could give some new ideas for management sciences, especially if you're going to deal with leadership or you're going to deal with cultural engineering, if you wish, or cultural design, the issues of strategic management, really, that we need to develop from an Islamic point of view. So I would love for this to be a group or a seminar that we develop, and I would love to participate in. فجزاكم khair, alhamdulillah. جزاكم khair.
Jazakallah khairan, Professor. Barakallah fikum. We are a little bit over time, but if you can, inshallah, be patient with us. We have, I have a couple of hands up, inshallah ta'ala. So, Dr. Zaid, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I was. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, this is an amazing opportunity, a great honor to be speaking to all of you, and the whole project here of the Maqasid Institute is, if I put it in one way, is that we live, I see the world that place with, we are always bombarded with negative news, with heartbreaking news, and we're looking for hope, and that is qunut. And then there are also people who are trying to do good in this world and then try to change the status quo. And these are like scattered candles. Now, the challenge is how can we make these scattered candles light up other candles? And this is in a way what we are trying to do as an organization at Maqasid Institute, is to light up these candles and spread this way of thinking, to bring better way of thinking. But this is also, alhamdulillah, so we have a vision. The vision definitely, like our dear Dr. Omnia was saying, that we are a global and a local and all that thing. And this is inshallah part of the vision, because it is essential that we do not lose the universality of Islam when we approach local challenges. And sometimes we think our problem is local, but many of the aspects are really global. And anyways, now we kind of live in a flat world, so sometimes the same problem manifests itself in all different societies. And by synergizing and networking all this amazing brain power of good and goodwill, whether Muslims or non-Muslims, we can do so much more. So my plea is that be patient with us. We talk about a lot of things. Many of them are not yet operational, but we are taking massive steps forward every year, alhamdulillah, and every month, really. So we do have very good problem that we are managing right now, is that all this interest, all this demand on time, resources, and expertise that are falling on us, and we are really operate with an extremely minimal budget, and we depend on really volunteer work. But I believe that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do this, then Allah has given us the resources to do this and carry this mission, bi'awnihi ta'ala. So, and yes, many of the things that, so we have the vision, we have a grand design which really incorporate what the Maqasidi thinking that Sheikh Jasser is advocating. And it's not only now Sheikh Jasser's thinking, it is all of you. All you are the fuqaha, you are the scientists, you are the scholars of the ummah. You all are part of this project. You are, by being here, you're all members of the Maqasid Research Network. Every single one of you have a say in this project. So please reach out to me, and I can tell you where we are and how we are organizationally and strategically we plan to achieve your good feedback and your good input, and how we're going to move there. Inshallah, the second half of this year, we're starting, we call after, it will be our 4th year and our 5th year of operation. And we are going to have an intensive, thorough, strategic review of where we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years, bi'awnihi ta'ala. But key aspects to all of that, and I want to address the issue of practicality of what is being said, is that yes, we need to making islah, improvement, rectification on the ground is integral to any attempt of reforming thought. Because what is the thought that I am reforming, for example, when it comes to sustainable development and good life and honorable living for all humanity, if I had never even experienced how the suffering people, the poor people, the downtrodden people living in the world, if I don't have a direct experience. So one of the things that we advocate is that you have to be in touch with the problem, and you have to understand the problem and the mechanism that created the problems. And you bring that and try to evaluate everything according to the methodology that we've studied, and you attempt to make improvement in the status quo of things, because that is the only way, proper, real way to understand if you are on the right track or not. So, but this is the full design of the Maqasid Research Network, and then Maqasid Research Network connects with Maqasid Action Network, which is the people who are trying to actually develop organizational strategies to apply the ideas and enhance the ideas and give feedback to the researchers. But the researchers and people who are on the ground, they should always have strong partnership and collaboration. It's not like that, so that they are addressing real problems, and they're fixing real problems, and fixing real problems is what really help the whole intellectual process of finding solution or finding gradual islah, because it's even hard to have an ideal outcome if we don't even know. That's what usually can make big projects fail. But gradual islah, improving the status quo, which is what I believe the Prophet ﷺ achieved in his own lifetime. He didn't achieve the most perfect society, but he made massive improvement in how humanity looked at itself and looked at the creation. So that is one thing. The other quick comment is that within all of this project, Maqasid Institute, we have to focus on the research and the production of ideas, and then we partner with other organizations and consult with other organizations on the application side, because we are not supposed to do everything. We cannot do anything, and we will fail if we attempt to do all of things. So that's why we are focusing now on forming the research groups, the topics, and organizing them, finding the optimal way to do it, inshallah. And then while we're also trying to start the seed work for how we are interacting with organization on the ground. Thank you, and again, I'm really appreciate that you're all here today. Please be in touch with us. Please snag us if you don't hear from us right away. This is your right. It is amana. Please, and then do that. And Jazakumullah khair. It is an honor to be with you and to serve you all.
Jazakumullah khair, Dr. Zaid. Jazakumullah khair. Something to share with everyone in this very dear group, that when I started the idea of Maqasid Institute back in 2014, I spoke with my ustad and my mentor at that time, Dr. Jamal Barzinji, rahimahullah. I spoke with him over the phone, then we met in the States, and I told him about the project, and he said, this is a great project and I will support it, and so on. I was very honored. And then, rahimahullah, I mean, he got ill and he passed, but he left, subhanallah, a gift for us who continued the project, really. Dr. Zaid, I knew him after the passing of his father, rahimahullah, but he turned out to be the best gift that Dr. Jamal has left for us for this project, for the Maqasid Institute. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Zaid. I really want to thank you in front of everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah khairan. Barakallah feek, Professor. Inshallah. And thank you, Dr. Zaid, for alhamdulillah. We definitely feel the potential, inshallah, among us all to be part of Al-Maqasid and to contribute, inshallah, with the research, as well as after research, connecting with the institutions and the action, inshallah, the different circles. طيب, I have Brother Omar. Brother Omar. And Brother Matthew, your microphone is back in action. You can raise your hand and inshallah. Okay. So Brother Omar, if you can hear us. Alaikum assalam. The voice is very low though.
Yes, my phone speaker is bad, so I try to speak loud as possible. Please hear me. So I actually I don't really have a question. I just want to put out okay, it's not a question really. It means is that I'm a graduate. I just finished university, and so this platform is
my brother Omar.
I see as a really affordable platform.
Perhaps you can text.
Yes, my brother Omar, your voice is intermittent and it's distorted as well. If perhaps you can type in the chat box your reflections, or if you can better the mic a little bit.
Inshallah.
طيب خير إن شاء الله. بارك الله فيكم أخي عمر. We'll wait إن شاء الله. Okay, you will type. Excellent. جزاك الله خيرا for accommodating us that way. While you type إن شاء الله, I want to thank everybody. جزاكم الله خيرا for your hilm and patience. And I'm really honored and glad that I crossed paths with all of you, mashallah, esteemed scholars and researchers, and a hope for the ummah, hope for humanity, hope for the world, really, in various disciplines. It's just, I can't fathom enough the amount of universality that we have here in this virtual and virtuous room, alhamdulillah. Various disciplines, various experiences, various walks of life all over the world. And we are gathered here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to reconnect humanity with the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, and to explore and read the Quran, inshallah, in the right lens. My announcements, as I mentioned, tonight, inshallah, you will receive an email. That email will have a questionnaire about the program. We encourage you all to fill it and participate in it. Inshallah, once you fill it, you will be able to receive a certification of attendance, or an e-certificate. So that's after you fill the questionnaire. We hope that you have been receiving our emails. If you have technical difficulties or problems, or you have not received anything, please reach out to us. Microsoft Teams, we have a group for the Research Network English speaking. So we'll join that temporarily. After that, we'll join the respective research groups. But there, you're welcome. The platform is open. And if you have any technical problems, we can reach out to Dr. Ildus. The lectures have been recorded, and they will be sent out today with the questionnaire, inshallah ta'ala. These are my my announcements. Jazakumullahu khairan. I don't know if my brother Omar typed anything yet. No, but
may I suggest that we can on the video, then we can take a photo. This is a very historical moment.
Okay, I am down for that. So for those who for those who, you know, it's convenient for them to share their cameras, please turn on your cameras and we'll take a screenshot, inshallah, and we'll send it in the group. So again, turn on your cameras if you don't mind, inshallah ta'ala, for us to take a group photo. Jazakumullahu khairan. Let me do that as we speak. And Ramadan Mubarak. Again, we mentioned this in the beginning and we mention it in the end, inshallah. Remember us in your dua, and these are virtuous times. طيب, I will. Bismillah. Okay, I have taken a photo.
Say Maqasid.
And say Maqasid.
Barakallahu feekum. Thank you, everybody.
So Professor, before we leave, inshallah, I pass it on to you for our closing dua, inshallah, for the program.
Jazakallah khair. The dua is for everyone, inshallah, to have a blessed Ramadan, and for this Ramadan to shift us to a much higher plane and a much closer state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless those who passed away in this tough year that we had before, that we know, and keep us, inshallah, on the straight path until we move there. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help with our efforts and put blessing on them, for them to be sadaqah jariyah, to be a running charity, inshallah, and a running action of good to be left in this world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect each and every one of you from the whims of the soul and from the whispers of the shaitan. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this Ramadan really a real change, and to make this just a start of our bond, inshallah, of brotherhood and sisterhood in Islam, and brotherhood and sisterhood in knowledge, and in the actualization and realization of this knowledge in the status of humanity and the state of people in general, and believers in particular. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us and to guide us, and for Jannat al-Firdaus for everybody, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله فيكم. وماي سلام.
For Brother Umar, Professor Jasser, inshallah, he wants some advice on career research. So Brother Umar, if you can please reach out to Professor Jasser or Maqasid.
I left my email, and please
I will share it as well.
Here it is. Yeah. Just please email, connect, and we'll be in touch, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله
فيكم. جزاكم الله خير.
بارك الله فيكم.
السلام عليكم.
Thank you so much. جزاكم الله خير.
جزاكم الله خير. بارك الله.
جزاكم الله خيرا كثيرا يا جد.
وإياكم.
الحمد لله. بارك الله فيكم.
جزاكم الله خير.
السلام عليكم.
شكرا جزيلا.
جزاكم الله خير.
عفوا.